The meeting to order. Would you please join me in the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The board would like to have a moment of silence for the casualties and the horrible situation in Florida, in Parkland, Florida. So we'd like to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. If you haven't signed the register in the back of the room, we'd appreciate it if you'd do so. Roll call of the board.
Ms. Dawn? Here. Mr. Hernandez? Mr. Jaramillo? Here. Ms. Quintero?
Present.
Mr. Crouch?
Present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Dawn?
Yes.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Crouch?
Aye. Now we have governing board comments. Ms. Dawn?
Sorry, was
sorry.
elsewhere there for a second. I just want to say how excited I am that we have such a huge group of young people here from their schools to celebrate all that they have done, and I just welcome them and their support from all their families.
Ms. Quintero?
It's a great day at Sunnyside, isn't it great? There was a great breakfast this morning honoring one of our special teachers, Mary Martinez. So thank you for that. I mean, that was represented as well, so thank you.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Yes, good evening, everybody, and it's totally awesome to see the turnout that we have tonight, and I would just like to say you're more than welcome to stay with us till about 11:30 tonight. But on another note,
The
I was,
administrators all look at each other, what?
right? I said, I was actually honored to be invited by Mr. Holmes to be with his student advisory students a few days after the incident in Florida happened. And we have some amazing and well-spoken young men and women here in our district that shared their thoughts and their concerns and how they felt. And I did invite them to come and speak to the college audience anytime they wanted to, because I feel that everybody should be heard, from the youngest one in our school to the ones that are graduating, the ones that have already gone on to their future, wherever they may be, and come back and be leaders of our community. But it was really, really interesting to hear these young men and women speak and how they felt as far as being how they felt being at school, their feelings about, times being scared to come to school. And, as adults and leaders of this community and this district, we have to listen to them, listen to their concerns, how minute it may be. But we should stand by them all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaramillo. I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's so exciting to see the students out here, and I won't go on. Mr. Holmes, Superintendent's report.
President Crouch, members of the audience, members of the governing board. I'd like to begin by congratulating Desert View Theater Program, who actually won a state championship this year. So congratulations to Ms. Erica Quintero. It's actually Desert View Troop 4478 for winning the Southern Regional State Championship and earning a superior ranking. This is my favorite part. The troop took this title with an impressive 117 total points by outscoring top-ranked South Point, Empire, and Sabino to take the Southern Regional title in a crowded field of 18 schools. If you haven't seen any of the drama performances from Ms. Quintero and that troupe, they're just amazing. Pro caliber kids doing some wonderful work in our drama program. So congratulations to Desert View High School.
And that deserves another applause.
Another congratulations to Elvira's Veronica Tapia, who wins the Bally Award from Ben's Bells. Veronica Tapia is an ABSS clerk at Elvira Elementary School, so received a visit from Ben's Bells founder Jeanette Marr, who presented Veronica with a Bell of Kindness Award on February 14th. Mrs. Tapia was recognized for her kindness at Elvira and throughout our community. The Bell Awards were created to recognize individuals who spread kindness daily, making our community a better place to live. Ben's Bells is a nonprofit founded by Janet Marr to inspire, educate, and motivate others to realize the impact of intentional kindness. Ben's Bells murals are in places at various SUSD schools, including Elvira, Rivera, Summit View Elementary Schools, and Sunnyside High School. And if you haven't got a chance to interact with Ms. Tapia, she's a wonderful parent advocate, who actually was one of the founders of the PTA there more recently, kind of bringing it back to life and bringing a lot of parents engaged in the work there at Elvira, and then took a position in there. And so that's kind of a perfect example, a wonderful community member giving back. And then lastly, we have Star Academic wins Battle of the Buildings. Star Academic High School is winning as the winner of the Sunnyside Battle of the Buildings competition by reducing its energy usage by over a 3-month period of an average of almost 5% when comparing usage from 2016 to 2017. Star Academic significantly reduced energy over time by as much as 10% during 1 month. Star Academic High School will receive a school-wide pizza party to go along with its lower energy footprint. I hope they're conserving all the pizza boxes and not throwing them. Recycling pizza boxes. In total, the 3 participating schools, Elvira, Challenger, and Star Academic High School, saved close to $6,900 between September and November of 2017. The competition was sponsored by Sunnyside Unified School District in collaboration with Tucson Electric Power, Sun Renew, Midstate Energy, City of Tucson, Tucson Water, and Tucson Clean and Beautiful. So just another way in which we continue to work hard to kind of squeeze any type of savings that we can for our school district by conserving energy. And so thanks to Marsha Flores and her efforts, and Cindy Beauvais for kind of leading that charge as well. That concludes our superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Would superintendent and board join me out in front?
You want me to start reading? Good afternoon. The Sunnyside Unified School District Governing Board recognizes Tucson Electric Power for their partnership in our efforts to increase energy efficiency and foster a culture of sustainability. We thank Ryan Anderson, Senior Key Account Manager, Business Development from Tucson Electric Power. We thank you for your support and efforts to contribute to the success of our schools, such as our Battle of the Buildings competition.
President Crouch and members of the board, Superintendent Holmes, I did want to come down here and actually recognize you and say that in 2017, Cindy Beauvais has provided some great leadership. You wrapped up 23 energy efficiency projects. In the year 2017, that means you were awarded $820,000 in rebates from TEP. That $820,000 would not have flowed into the school district if it was not for Cindy and her great work. I also wanted to pull back a little bit and say, if you go back to 2011, you've been working diligently on being better environmental stewards from that time as well. If you go back to 2011, you've captured over $1.5 million in rebates from Tucson Electric Power. That money would not come to your district if it wasn't, again, for the hard work of your staff. So just to give you an idea of how impressive that is, those 71 projects all together represent, hi Becky, over 10 million kilowatt hours annually. That is, yes, savings on your energy bills, but it's more than that. It's making your classrooms more comfortable places for learning, and even more importantly, it's exhibiting an ethic of stewardship to your students. So to that end, I brought this plaque to recognize that and the values that you're exhibiting to the community. And the plaque says, Tucson Electric Power hereby presents this award of achievement to the Sunnyside School District in recognition of the district's sustained focus on energy efficiency and environmental stewardship. Sunnyside Unified School District has partnered with TEP to save millions of kilowatt hours and model responsible energy use to our community's youth. Thank you very much for what you do. Yeah, I can present.
We also have a plaque for you. The Battle of the Plaques. The Sunnyside Governing Board recognizes Tucson Electric Power, for their partnership and our efforts to increase energy efficiency and foster a culture of sustainability. On behalf of the students and the families in the Sunnyside District, we thank you for your dedication to our learning community.
Thanks. Thank you, Superintendent.
And thank you, Cindy. Mr. Holmes is going to do the next recognition.
We did 31? 31? You guys ready? Yeah. I want to formally congratulate Coach Leon and all our wonderful wrestlers in Sunnyside Unified School District, but more specifically Sunnyside High School, for bringing home state championship in Division I. I got to make sure it's real clear. We 6A division, highest division that anyone can compete in. These young men, along with Coach, brought home a victory to bring home our 31st state championship. A proud legacy that we have in our wrestling program. And Coach Leon, I thank you for bringing the program to where it's at right now, bringing it back to the state championship level and winning at the highest division level, which has not been accomplished. And I really, really thank you. And I want to bring all the young men up to talk more specifically about their awards. But if you guys can come up here and join me up here, please. Here, little man. Good job, man. Good job, little Brown. Here it goes. There's Mr. Brown. There's the big man. Good job. There's my, you gotta stand up here with me. Stay right here. Come here, stay right here with me. There he is. Good job, Coach. You guys are good, look good. There's Coach. Where's Coach at? Coach, please come up here, join me up here. Coach is high, Coach is humble. I gotta bring Coach up to the front. Coach, it's with great honor and pleasure that I congratulate you here personally. You exhibit what we want our coaches to exhibit in the district, and I mean that. Your dedication, your hard work. If you guys know Coach Leon, he's there every single day, all day. And he's going to be there tomorrow to get these guys working and getting them ready for 32. Right? I mean, that's what you have here before. And I want to make sure that it's not lost on me what you put into the program. It's the many conversations that we've had over the last few years, the many conversations and challenges, right? And trying to make sure that we're supporting and making sure that you have necessary to get these young men up to where it needs, because there is a legacy that you have that's a big challenge, right? When you've had state champions for so many years, being a coach in Sunnyside is no joke, right? It comes with a high level of expectation, and you delivered. And I know from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you, because you are truly a coach that I value, that I know they don't make them like you very much. I honestly, I mean, it's hard to do, and you've done a wonderful job, and I want to make sure we're publicly recognizing you. I want to recognize some of the young men as well, if you can help me do that as well.
Yep.
But if you can you join me in recognizing Coach Leon, please?
stand next to my lawyer.
Where's the superintendent? Superintendent, can you come up here, please? This is the real superintendent right here. I just want to make sure. If you can take over now, I'm going to be standing out here. Why don't you help me out since you look, doesn't it look good? Will you help me recognize our state champions, the actual individual winners? Can you do that?
We've got the team.
You want to do a team first?
Yeah, so.
Let's do a team. Help me,
Let's
coach.
go down the road,
Okay.
down the line. 106-pound fourth place finisher. We had 10 place winners and 4 state champions and 13 state qualifiers, and we had 14 mainstay, 15 mainstays throughout the lineup. James Brown, fourth place finisher, 106 pounds.
All right, James.
State champion, two-time state champion, now sophomore, soon to be ranked nationally, Jesse Ibarra.
All right, Jesse.
Senior, off to college, two-time state champion, a legacy of 7 state titles in his family, Juan Manuel Garcia. 126-pound, two-time runner-up, heading into his 3rd state finals, monkey off his back, 126-pound Division I state champion, that sounds really good, Vicente Loaiza. Okay, number 1 ranked in the country, and he's a pretty darn good wrestler, Roman Bravo Young. And he wears Birkenstocks.
Ready for Penn State, right there. He's an Ivy Leaguer now.
Two-time state place winner, huge part of our team, took a 4th place this year, Aaron Rodriguez.
Right, Aaron. Go, Aaron. Good job, man.
Newcomer, 2nd year wrestling in his life, makes it to the state tournament. Big part of what we're doing, great character, Noah Martinez.
Good job, Noah.
Okay, he's not here tonight, but we'll recognize him because he's the soul. He's the soul patrol of our team, Willie Rose.
Or really, whoa, give it where's Willie at?
Next up is the quietest guy in here. Took a 6th place this year for us. Was a finalist in most of the tournaments we went to. Elijah Wyatt, Loffers only. He's also not here tonight. He was this young man was diagnosed with life-altering epilepsy a week before the state tournament. Competed, took a 5th place for us. Just an incredible young man. He's not here tonight. Sebastian Mordecai. Definitely a big part of what we're doing moving forward. Had a great year. Orlando Sotelo. The ambassador, Matt Reese.
Enough said. That's all you got to say.
Funny story, we had a 33-2 freshman 220-pounder tear his ACL late into the season. We went and got a guy at 7-Eleven, found him at the 7-Eleven drinking a Slurpee. All he did for us was on a few weeks of practice take 6th in the state. He weighed just over 195 pounds and wrestled 220, 6th in the state Division I wrestling horses. James Soto.
Get that big gulp.
Next guy he makes the best soup in the whole south. The south side is better at soup because of this guy, and he's been around the program since he was a little child. Andrew Peralta.
Chef.
And last but not least, we have Adrian Monreal, the heavyweight.
All right, dude. Good job. And then we have, actually, for our coaches. Coach, I got to give it to, and help me read this, one of you guys? Want to give one to Coach for me?
What?
We're gonna do this together. Waking them up, come on, right. Give one to, who we're giving this to?
Leon.
Coach Leon, come on.
Thanks,
Coach, thank you. And we have got Coach, where's Joaquin Olivas? Is he not here? Cam? He's in college, he's actually studying. Is Ulises Lopez, he's not up here. We got some young college kids who are business school, who are actually helping the team. We got to recognize that we have Sunnyside graduates coming back. And then this guy, Orlando Sotero. Words?
Hey guys, I just keep this really short. From the wrestlers to our student trainers, actually back there, she did a wonderful job with our team, and we wouldn't really be a state championship team without all of the help from the parents and the community. They support us so much. The one thing I did want to say, and maybe this is political, I guess, in nature, but with all the school shootings and stuff going on, and maybe there's a lot of fear and stuff, I'll tell you what, I look around these kids and the kids that I have in the wrestling room. We just got out of the wrestling room, as a matter of fact, just a few minutes ago before here. But I'll tell you what, they seem happy. They seem real happy. So I don't know if maybe there's a correlation between kids that are a little happier and kids that are excited to go to school and compete in sports and do something with their lives that's positive. But, maybe, just maybe, that might be something to look into, because I look around the wrestling room at Sunnyside, and last night our kids' practice was 55 kids deep, and today we were practicing, and these guys are fired up, and I just don't see a whole lot of kids that are real down on themselves. So maybe if we get kids involved in something and stick some money where it belongs, into sports and athletics and clubs and keeping kids after school, maybe we might get somewhere. And that's me speaking as maybe a little bit, biting off a little bit more than I should chew, but anyway, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much to the governing board and to the administration at Sunnyside and everybody in here. Thank you so much.
But let's try to get a picture. Were you able to get everyone? We're good with pictures? Guys, thank you very much. Okay, appreciate you guys. I'll see you on campus. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, man, made my day. Good job. What'd you say? Still, you don't know? Good job, gentlemen. I said they're good. They're going to go. Oh, I know. Get check. Quick fingers. Sorry, I just want to wait because I want to make sure we give this young man his due too. Okay, now we got Desiree in the house too, right? I want to call up Raul. Raul, come join me, please. Coach Lozano, if you can come up and join me as well. Why this is special to me is because I was like the first class from Sunnyside that got split. Remember when Sunnyside and Desiree got built in '86? I was part of the '87 graduating class, which were the first group. So it was my class that actually got split, that was together at the freshman campus. And so Desert to me has always been kind of one school, because when they split us, we're all like we all knew each other. Since then, it kind of became this greater rivalry, but to me, it's always been like we're one and the same, just because I kind of happen to be in that bubble of kids that split up. And so this is important to me because I think the competitive spirit that is Desert View, to me, is always what I knew when they split up, was that we're all one family. And the competitive nature of what happens in Desert View is critically important. And you make us proud because you're holding that legacy of champions. You a state champion, Raul Martinez, at the 115. I got it right. See, I was once about this small, but I didn't look as good as him. He's like a better looking kid, but I was thinner a little bit. I wrestled 115 too, but I didn't win state championship or anything like that. So one of the things that makes us so proud, I think, as we're recognizing you and Coach. I know Coach Buddy. We got senior here, so we got the next best thing or the better thing? Next best. Next best. Okay, that worked. So I make sure I'm quoting it correctly. But I do think, Coach, I think the amount of time we put in for all our kids, particularly as we look at a legacy of state championships, we have to also recognize the individual young efforts of our young men who are doing equally great work for our schools. So I want to congratulate you and Desert View for their championship, and more important, Raul, who's going to be an Air Force guy, so we're going to have to help this guy out and make sure, right, Coach, that he's successful and continues on doing great work and making us proud as you move on and serve our great nation. So thank you, Raul. Appreciate you, man. You want to say anything, Coach?
Yeah, this is a special young man. He wrestled his freshman and sophomore year, and then he got hurt in his junior year. He had surgery, so he didn't wrestle at all his junior year. He came out for us this year for his senior year and did his job. I had to go in the hallway and kick him in the butt a couple of times to get him to practice, but he got his job done. And congratulations, RJ. And to Sunnyside.
I had the distinct pleasure of having Raul in my class as an Air Force Junior ROTC cadet. And he excelled as a cadet, as he excelled this year in wrestling, as a no-quit spirit. And he shows the integrity, character, and that's what we try to instill in the cadets at Desert View High School. And I want to personally congratulate him, because I did see him in action a few times. So keep up the good work, okay?
One more picture there.
You're right there.
Really? We're representing Arizona Wildcats.
It is.
Where'd they all go?
I don't know. They just
It's not that windy.
I think so.
Next on the agenda is call of the audience. Joe Barboa. And you have 3 minutes, sir. 3 minutes?
He can come back next week to finish it up.
Part 1, Part 2, Part 3.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me have this moment. I'm basically here today because of the mass shootings that we had. I want to compliment the board, all the educators. I graduated Sunnyside in '77. I have 4 kids that graduated from Sunnyside. And I've always said that I really believe that we have a unique bunch of kids in Sunnyside District. We have a bunch of kids who really care about each other in their community. You know, we got some kids that have problems and so forth, but it's all about, them caring for each other. And in Tucson in general, I really believe that our students are really caring students. So that being said, a year ago, after the elections, I felt that I needed to get involved in dealing with the gun issues, the opiate issues, and also the immigration issue. I met with Raul Grijalva and his staff, and they were, I talked to them some of the ideas I had, and they were behind me 100%. And I have to admit that I called here, school board, nobody returned my calls, but I also called some of the city council members, nobody returned. And I'm not blaming them. I didn't follow it myself, and I just dropped the ball on it. When this incident happened, one of the students said, if you haven't done anything, then you're part of the problem. That hit me like a ton of bricks. So subsequently, I'm a musician as well, and I do have a small business of entertainment promotion, and I am working with a local recording artist, Alberto Gallegos. For those of you who don't know who he is, he's from Tucson, with the Pueblo. He has about 20 CDs to his credit. He used to sing with Mariachi Cobre, to honor Bland and Breed. Now he's in town forming a new group, and we're doing some promotions. We were going to do a Mother's Day promotion. And I started talking to him, said, Alberto, says, why don't we do something about the mass shootings? So we're basically following, we're just really in not even the seed aspect of it. What we want to do is get a coalition, and we have, at this time we're calling it Coalition for Celebration of Life and the Power of Women. The reason why we came up with this, we want to celebrate everybody's life, make life precious to everybody. And our culture, and mostly all the cultures, if you want to get something done, a wedding, party, quinceañera there, you get nana, you get mama, you get the other, everybody and it gets done. Wait for dad and everything, mañana, no, but I mean, we joke about it, but seriously, that's what we're doing. And since it's around Mother's Day, we wanted to acknowledge the power of the women. So, as things stand right now, we're going to use music as a magnet. We're trying to get Diaba to let us have it, but we're still looking for any venue that will work with us. I'm here to ask, basically, I got a mission statement that I can leave with the board, and to ask the board, I'm not asking to actually have hands-on, just be willing to support what we're doing. Later, maybe we can get together and work on some more things as well. Okay, Mom, I'm coming home. The other thing I want to really compliment the athletes that, but I was talking to some of the kids, and they talk very highly of their coaches. They said the head coach they said that he really supports them, backs them up. Orlando, I've known Orlando for years, and he said, Orlando, they will do anything in their power above and beyond to help them out. And all the kids were humble. And that's, like I said, my 4 kids graduated from Sunnyside. My oldest daughter has a son wrestling for Walden Grove, and he just won his 3rd state championship. He's a junior, and his only defeat was from Sunnyside. So I told the guy, I met the guy, and I told him that I was going to tell my grandson that broke his legs, he's never going to wrestle again. Anyway, so I'm there. My entertainment promotion company, I will work with anybody in the school district, do any benefits fundraisers we need to do as well. I can bring anybody from Tiravici to Tumacacari on up to Santana, whoever we need to do. Okay, so my service, now leave business cards to you guys as well. Okay, so please, we're looking at to do whatever we can in conjunction with you guys and above beyond. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's all we call to the audience we have tonight.
That's it.
I want to get a picture of it.
Can I go home and eat? Yes. Good night, you guys.
Good night. Thank you. Next on the agenda is consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez? Mr. Hernandez.
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Yes.
Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye, motion passes. Next on the agenda is general functions, English language learners update. Pam Benton?
Oh, let's see.
Good evening, President Crouch, Governing Board members, Superintendent Holmes, members of the audience. This has become my regular post at board meetings, I think. Tonight, we've covered math updates, we covered English language arts update, and tonight we want to talk a little bit more in depth around our English language learners. Some of the current things, places that we're at, what some of the data looks like. Carmen Castro will be sharing some of that. And then also some future concepts that we're thinking about, including bringing back dual language and some of those pieces as we move through. So we're going to start out with Carmen Castro walking us through.
My favorite place behind this big, really quiet without all the wrestlers here. So. But good evening, and thank you for having me again. I was hoping I'd do one presentation, but I'm back again this week. So if you notice my title to the slides, it's second language learners, right? We know that they're learning English, but I think we have to acknowledge that they're learning a second language, and that is an accomplishment. And so I just wanted to start with that piece. So yes, we're still doing structured English immersion. Right? That is the program that has been mandated by our state, and I gave you a little history in the notes of our slides, and I won't go through that whole process, but we have been implementing SEI since 2007, and that is our current model for our instruction of our ELL students. And I will highlight a couple of the pieces, especially the pieces that happened in 2016 with the OCR investigation that happened at the state level and what were some of its implications. Okay, so our SEI model. So we are still keeping our ELL students together for 4 hours a day, particularly at our elementary level. There have been some refinements in the state model where they allow intermediate students at second year intermediates to have 2 hours of SEI instruction. But at our elementary schools, because we have about one classroom per grade level, we don't have the opportunity to utilize the 2-hour model at our elementary schools. But our secondary schools, we do have 4 hours for our pre-emergent, emergent, and basic students. So they are in 4 hours of SEI instruction, which means they get 1 English credit and 3 electives, which it's a challenge for our high school students to graduate on time. And so we're trying to do things to ensure that especially our long-term ELLs are able to start high school with that opportunity to earn enough credits to graduate on time or within 4 years. Also this year we participated in an ADE audit of our SEI programs the week of January 22nd through the 26th. They spent 5 days with us visiting 10 sites. So they monitored our classroom lesson plans, our files, and interviewed teachers, which was something new that we hadn't experienced in the past. We passed our SEI compliance visit, and so, we're doing what we're supposed to in that respect. And so it allows us time to really focus on instruction now because we're monitored about every 4 years. So with this and passing our compliance audit, we'll be able to focus on instruction for our ELL students. Okay, some of our data. Okay, our kids, right, that are coming to us, especially that start with us, right, they're thinking in one language, but we're expecting them to produce in a second language, and that comes with its challenges, and how we address that within this model that we are faced with. There are parts that we have to do. So in our school district, and there's a slide that shows most of our ELLs coming in, we have about 402 identified kindergartners who come to us speaking a second language, a language other than English. And so that's where we have to focus some of our energies and figure out how are we helping our students reclassify so they have access to other courses and honestly other teachers. So I will once again address that in a little bit. I gave you an example of what our reassessment scores were in 2016 and 2017. So in 2016 was when the OCR and Department of Justice I don't know if investigation is the right word, but they were looking into our programs and specifically on how quickly we reclassified our ELL students. And although the state of Arizona did not admit any wrongdoing, they agreed to go with the recommendations, which were to change the cut scores for reclassification so that our students have to achieve a higher level of English proficiency before they're reclassified. So what that meant was our students were possibly being reclassified too soon, right, in the previous model, or being misidentified. So kindergarten students, if they scored orally proficient, they were not labeled as an ELL student. So we had to go back and retest some students, and that also impacted our reclassification rate. So in 2016, we had a reclassification across the district about 22%. The following year, in 2017, we had about 12% reclassification rate, which is more indicative of our population. So we expected that drop, and we are now trying to address how do we meet the needs of our ELL students with the confines of the 4-hour block. Okay.
Carmen, Mr. Kraus, just clarification to add to Carmen's point. The test has changed probably about 7 times since 2004. About time. The reason I mentioned that is it's hard to track. I mean, so when we try to use data, right, you want some consistency of baseline over time. It's gone from being easy to pass to being now very difficult to pass, and then every manifestation in between. And so it's when you're looking at historical data, it also complicates the efforts. Although the ADE will say, hey, miracles happen with these. It really was a byproduct of an easier test, quite frankly. And I want to go on record saying that, and saying specifically that the test is more difficult and probably more appropriate in some ways as well. But as we're looking at the data, we still have a lot of work to do, but it does skew our ability to look at historical trends over time.
And we are anticipating another change because the standards the ELP English Language Proficiency Standards will be revised, which means we will have another new assessment. When comparing our ELLs to our non-ELLs, and Mr. Hanshot helped me compile some of this data, and so he is very cognizant of FERPA regulations, and so you may have seen some asterisks, especially in the higher grades, because we have less ELL students. And so when you have that few students, you can possibly identify who those students are and which category they fall into. So that's where you may have seen some asterisks within the graphs. So I wanted to put our ELL students, we didn't include our reclassified students in this data, and I think that's another area that we need to highlight, and what happens to our students once they move out of our ELL classrooms and what sort of supports are they receiving. But if you notice, most of our ELL students are falling in this minimally proficient or partially proficient area. And I would look particularly at third grade. If our students have been with us since kindergarten, third graders, their 4th year with us. And they're falling into these the majority of our students are minimally proficient. And particularly concerning are our math data, right, is that our students, if you're in a 4-hour block, that means you're receiving less math instruction because there are only a certain number of minutes a day. So if you're allotting 4 hours to language instruction, that means that you get 30 to 60 minutes of math instruction. And that, over the long period, impacts our students and their math data, as well as, you know, the opportunities that they have as they move forward in abilities to take higher courses in math. So this is concerning, right, if you're looking at this data and how our ELL students are performing within this model that we currently have. So in order to address some of our, I have to get back to the slideshow right here. I wanted to give you as an example of where the majority of our ELL students are across the district. And like I said, in kindergarten is where we have the majority. In K-6 is where the majority of our ELL students are. That has implications as well, and I will show you in our reclassification data. So if our students are identified as kindergarten students, they take one assessment. In first and second grade, they take a different assessment, same test, but if they don't reclassify at the end of second grade, we can almost guarantee that those students will be identified as ELL students at least until 5th grade, because they take a different assessment 3rd through 5th grade. And so if they didn't reclassify in second grade, they will probably continue as an ELL students for those 7 years of K through 6th grade. And that also has implications in classrooms, right? If you're keeping ELL students together for 7 years, right? That has behavior implications. It has implications in instruction, because there's really only one choice for our parents in those classrooms to choose from, right? So that's a concerning piece that we have to address within this model. So in order to mitigate some of those students continuing moving as ELL students, we meet with our parents and we show them their AZELA data, how they've performed. We show them their academic data. If they're performing close to the district average on state assessments in math and ELA, we show all of that data to our parents, and they have that right to choose if they want their students to remain in an SEI classroom or not. So we, at specific benchmarks, we bring our parents in and show them their data so that they can make informed decisions. Because I can't recommend that you move a child out of an SEI classroom. The parents have to make that decision. But we have to inform our parents so that they're making the right decision for their child. And that's, we do that at the end of 5th grade, at the end of 8th grade, so that our parents have the right information for their classroom, for their child and placement.
Can I have a question?
Ms. Quintero?
Before I lose my train of thought. So, if the parent says, I want to put my child in a regular classroom, and then he's not succeeding, can they then put them back in?
Yes.
During that year?
There is a process for that, for the student to be placed back into an if that's what the parent chooses, yes. And a teacher can also make that recommendation.
Okay,
So it's not a decision that they can't go back on.
thanks.
Yes, sir.
But before they go back, the parent has to make that final decision, correct?
Correct. It's always the parent's decision on where an ELL student is placed. As we move forward, our sites, there are some sites that have a higher number of ELL students and reclassified students within their populations. Right? And just so that you have an idea of where most of our ELL students are, I gave you an example of that information, as well as the reclassified students, so that you have an idea of that as well. Do you have any questions about so far? And then I think I had high schools as well. That is a concerning piece. When our students come to us in high school as an ELL students, how can we create a plan that allows them opportunities to earn enough credits to graduate? Especially when they come to us as pre-emergent students and they're having 3 electives versus the opportunity to take courses that they need to graduate. So we have created certain structures to support our SEI teachers. As you may imagine, it is additional planning that needs to happen to support our ELL students. And so we have instituted, especially this year, school business days for our SEI teachers. Our secondary teachers are pulled out once a month so that they have opportunities to plan together, to develop their curriculum, to review data, because many of our secondary ELL teachers are new. And so we wanted to provide them opportunities within the school day to do some of that planning. Because after school, it's hard to consistently have teachers. So that we moved to this year, as well as in our K2 and 3-5. We have teacher cadres, but we're utilizing school business days so that we have consistent attendance as well as continuity throughout the school year to support their needs in supporting our ELL students. And that was one of the major changes. We do some of the same things that I talked about last time for our ELA teachers, but that is something that we do specifically for our SEI teachers because we're trying to retain them to continue so that it's not someone new being the SEI teacher every year.
Ms. Quintero?
Quick question.
Yes.
So it is the second language. How many languages are we doing? Just Spanish?
So right now, everything is in English.
Right, but the second language.
Right, we have about 6 languages represented in our district right now, which is a change for Sunnyside. I mean, historically, we have had only Spanish as our other language, and so now we have our Somali population that is with us. We have Vietnamese-speaking students. So that provides different challenges, right? Because if you speak the language of the child, that's already an advantage that you have not only with the child, but with the family. So that has provided different challenges and opportunities for us to support our other languages other than Spanish. I am very lucky to have 2 program specialists who support our schools. Dr. Julia Lindberg is here, and she will speak a little bit about our dual language ideas, and Crystal Foster works mostly with our secondary students.
And Mr. Harmon has a question.
This may be for our HR department. When we're seeking or recruiting teachers, do we look into that category of teachers? Do they speak another language, possibly?
One of the things that's on
Application.
one of the things that's on our application is we always ask if they have a second language and whether it's fluent or, because some people will check yes, but it's not fluent, it's more, how to get to the bathroom. So it's limited. Yes, conversation are very limited. So yeah, we do ask that and look for it when we go to job fairs and hopefully seek it out. And in Arizona, at the job fairs, we have a lot of candidates who come. Because of the second language.
Thank you.
Another thing regarding HR, and is something that we are now having to investigate, is previously anyone who graduated had to have an SEI endorsement so that you were able to, it was minimal, right, the 45 hours, 60 hours to receive your SEI endorsement. That's no longer the case. Students who are now leaving university or programs do not have to have an SEI endorsement.
They took that off?
Yes. Correct. That has been removed, and so not everybody. So that may prove to be a challenge for us as we move forward, especially in our elementary schools. At secondary schools, that is how we post a position for an ELD teacher. But at the elementary level, at kinder, you really don't know how many ELL students you're going to have until we administer the assessment.
Right.
And so you may start off as a kindergarten teacher, but we may need you to be an SEI kindergarten teacher. And that is something that I'm working with Laura Emsley and Dr. Bergman on. How do we address that need, or what will Sunnyside require of their teachers And that may be something that we need to bring forward later about what certification would we want or prefer to have in Sunnyside. And I see that being an issue as we move forward, our shortage of teachers. What we're in the process of doing with Dr. Lindberg is creating an SEI. The coursework has changed, and in the past, we had an online course that was provided free of charge for our teachers to take that course. We're in the process of recreating that course because of the changes, so that our teachers would have, and they wouldn't have to pay for that.
Ms. Dahl?
I'm glad to hear that, because in all honesty, part of that training, the best part of that training came from Sunnyside, and so I think it'll be, we have the ability because we have the people that know how to do it and are great at the training of the SEI, so we can't get it through people that feel they know what they're doing, but at least we do know what we're doing. And I think it'll be a great opportunity if we put together our own training, since we were the ones that used to go out and train people anyways,
Right.
all over the place.
Exactly, and so that is our goal.
We have that advantage.
Hope so. Thank you. Next.
Martina Josefina, the most beautiful cockroach, was my book that I read this week for another reading week.
So next step.
Sorry.
There are 2 House bills right now that are moving and hopefully forward. There's House Bill 2435, which would recommend that we eliminate the 4-hour requirement to a 2-hour requirement. And at K6, that would be 120 minutes, and at the secondary level, 100 minutes, so that it would be 2 class periods. So and the ability to adopt alternative models and change some of the budgeting structures. So that's House Bill 2435 that we are hoping moves forward. The other House Bill 2281 is regarding dual language programs. And so if that one would move forward and pass, it would remove the 4-hour requirement for those participating in a dual language program. So those, we have high hopes that those pass and would be able to be implemented within our school district. Other next steps are next year we will be offering Spanish for high school credit at 8th grade, so that we hopefully can increase our number of students who can participate in AP Spanish at the high school level. We have a very high success with that program. Many of our students are scoring 4s and 5s on the AP exam in Spanish. And so we'd like to provide not only a Spanish course for non-native speakers, but also for those who speak Spanish, who may have the oral language but need to develop their reading and writing skills. So that will begin at least in one of our middle schools next year, and hoping to move to our other middle schools as we move forward. And they will be collaborating with our high school teachers to ensure that the curriculum that they're teaching in 8th grade matches what they would get in a high school course. The other piece is the seal of biliteracy. Mr. Gastelum has been instrumental in helping move that forward so that our students who meet a certain criteria, which includes passing their ELA courses, scoring a 4 or 5 on the AP exam, would then have a seal of biliteracy on their diploma. So we have completed the paperwork that we need to do to move that forward for this coming June. So those are mainly the main next steps, unless you have questions.
I have a couple
Yes, sir.
comments, I think, more than questions. Dual language learning, I think, is essential to all of our students. I think we should offer it from kindergarten on up, and it should be truly bilingual dual language. I'm not sure what the right
Biliterate
what term is, but all of our students should have that opportunity, not just the non-English speakers, but the English speakers. All of our students, I think, should have that to be able to compete in the global economy of the future. That said, if we had a clean slate, if we weren't restricted by the state, what is the best approach to take and to teach our students a truly bilingual or multilingual environment.
And I think Julia and Mary are going to move into that.
Okay.
Of how we would go about it.
Okay.
Right? Great question, thank you.
That was a great segue. And I'm going to ask Julia Lindberg and actually also Mary Martinez to join us up here. As I'm rolling around the room with this. It is the dual language piece, the two-way, that concept of bilinguality was probably one of the greatest journeys of my professional career in 1999. We had and Carmen was a part of that team, and some of our other principals now, to start a dual language program. And it was a huge amount of work and incredibly rewarding. And so what you say, the value of that, what I saw with my own kids as I put their names first on the list to kind of say it's going to be okay, even with my own kids, and to watch our students go through and go on to college, and every year we look to see, I compete with Deb to see, is my valedictorian, am I salutatorian? Is that, well, they're from the dual language program, or they're from, so it's really, to your point, the passion for it, I think is widespread. And so Julia's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing so far. Mary's also going to chime in. She's a part of our committee, and also as the preschool place, because the regulations, if you will, are so much less intense, it gives us some freedom to begin playing in that area with language. And so we're going to have Mary talk a little bit about that and then entertain more questions, next steps, what are we thinking? All right.
Thanks, Pam. Good evening, President Crouch, Mr. Holmes, members of the board. I'm really excited to be here and kind of paint some broad strokes about where we're going with our dual language program. We agree, Mr. Crouch, that this is that all students should have the opportunity to develop bilingualism and biliteracy. And so we are in the beginning planning stages, and like Carmen mentioned, we have the seal of biliteracy and the Spanish class coming on board next year, and so we're trying to approach developing bilinguals and biliterate students from both ends of our spectrum. So we'd like to create a strand that begins in our preschool, where we have more flexibility to work through, and we have the curriculum. Mary's going to talk a little bit about the curriculum option that we have in preschool, so that we can bring back this great program to help our students in our community. So we're looking to create a strand that goes all the way from preschool all the way through 12th grade. And like many dual programs throughout the United States, our dual program has some really specific elements to its vision. First, we want to make sure that we have grade level academic achievement for all students, whether they're our English speaking students or our Spanish for home language students, and that we develop additive bilingualism. Right now in the current state, we have sort of a let's replace your language with that language. And so we want to honor and create prestige for both languages. And finally, we want to create cultural competence for our students so that students can flow in and out of different situations, and wherever they are in town, wherever they are in the world, if they end up going to Penn State, they know they know how the world works in those situations. We've used some guiding principles in the work that we've done so far. We've worked through a planning document that's from the duallanguageschools.org. It's an organization of schools that have developed dual language programs throughout the country. We're also depending very heavily on the Center for Applied Linguistics. They're in now their third edition of a guidance document, a book really to help schools and districts to develop high quality programs for students. One of the professors that we're working with is a former professor from ASU who now works with the Center for Applied Linguistics, and her job is to evaluate bilingual dual language programs throughout the country. So we're really leaning on her, Dr. Beatriz Arias, to help us with this initial planning, as well as a whole very excited group of professors from the U of A in the bilingual program there at the U of A who have been participating with us in our steering committee. So we have a district steering committee. We tried to get a really broad range of stakeholders, and Ms. Dong was able to join us at our last meeting, so thank you very much for being there. It was, it's been really instructive to see what this program is going to look like from a whole lot of different perspectives. And we have former students, we have Mary's on our committee as our teacher, we have both principals from Ocotillo and Sierra with us, and a bunch of us from central office as well. And we have invited some parents. We have several parents that are interested. We've been collecting interest cards for the past couple of months. Right now we have about 30 families who are very interested and excited, and I know that Mr. Ohm is planning on incorporating interest cards into his registration materials and his publicity for Ocotillo as well, so he can develop even more interest in the program and get us on our way. So there's some big decisions that we're making, again, really broadly as the steering committee. We're looking at model types, and I won't delve too deeply into the research phase, but there are basically two model types for two-way dual language immersion, where you have roughly a balance of home language English speakers and home language target language speakers, in our case Spanish. And you can either start as a 90% in the target language and grow English all the way up until it's about 50-50, or you can start with 50% in the target language and 50% in English. And so that decision we're still grappling with a little bit. We're kind of leaning toward 50-50 as our starting point. We're also asking the teachers. We've had a meeting with the Ocotillo teachers, and we really want teacher input on the language allocations, how we're going to make sure that both languages are represented equally. Whether we do that daily, weekly, by subject, that's going to be kind of more of a site decision once we have our student population and our teacher population in place. Similarly, we're going to be looking toward the teachers to help us make the decision about literacy instruction and where we start with literacy. And so right now we're just in the phase of really recruiting students and building that interest and knowledge among the parent population and with the families, and also trying to make some decisions about curriculum. And so, Mary, do you want to talk about
Ms. Dong has a question.
Oh, just real quick before you go from this, the 90-10 and the 50-50, will part of that maybe be dependent on the recruitment of the students and where they're at and how many?
Yeah, it
I
really
would
depends.
imagine.
In the research that we've read within the committee so far, we want to make sure that our target language, our Spanish-speaking students, are at about 33%. So if they're at least, and so if it's 33% or a little more, then that might sway how we recruit and how we decide.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Continue, please.
Mary, did you want to share a little bit about your experience in that?
I'm here as part of the committee, but also I taught dual language, in Nogales, and I had the opportunity to work with the 90-10 model. So I started in kindergarten with 90-10, and then I moved to 4th grade the following year, where it was flipped, because by then you move into the 80-20 and so on. And the amazing thing was watching these 4th graders. I mean, were biliterate. They have both languages, and we had African Americans, we had, Caucasians, we had like 3-4 different languages, and their parents also became biliterate, and, because we were talking about building in the parent engagement into all of this also. And then, hoping to be one of the teachers, that starts in pre-K. And when we were talking about why pre-K would be the perfect place, it's kind of because of the state of Arizona, and there's a lot more flexibility. Plus, also, I just kind of brought a little bit of, can I enter the realm? That we already have, at least in pre-K, we have curricula for literacy in both languages already. So all of the pre-K teachers at Ocotillo have access to, both English and Spanish. We have books, both in English and Spanish, that go with that. Right now, I'm not doing a dual language, but I am incorporating Spanish into my day because we read the stories. Either I choose it in English or Spanish, but I don't read both languages because I want to make sure that we're not just translating. So I think it's really important, kind of like what we were talking about, is to make sure that we're starting, with pre-K, because we have teachers who are already excited and interested in, and have experience in teaching dual language, where we can start, and we can also incorporate those teachers who may not have the experience, and if we have enough interest, and I'm talking about this stuff, but I could do the Spanish, and then someone could do the English. So then, if we have enough interest with our Coyote pups, we can expand it, and then we can kind of, figure out where we're going with this. And
And I think those pieces of growing that base, really starting to develop the insides that you really need to make this happen. And one of the pieces, and I think in lessons learned, because we ran the 50/50 at Amigos for 10 years, actually 11 years, but the law was different. We had a grant that gave us a lot of money at the time. We had some other pieces that we could work with at Amigos that we don't have now. We have different challenges that we need to look for. One of them was also move on when reading. And so when we look through those literacy pieces that our students face, we are really forcing ourselves to think this, as Steve always says, what's the long game? Push this domino all the way out to try and eliminate missteps, to try and think through how do we overcome the challenges and how do we create our first run at it that is really successful. That means looking at curriculum. It's easier in pre-K because we're not bound by those pieces. But thinking through when you have students who don't qualify yet, how do we think through that? So if they don't qualify yet, and let's say they're in kinder and they don't qualify yet, their reading instruction begins in English because they don't qualify yet. So then how are we thoughtful about that to say at what point then do we make that happen? So they don't get caught in move on when reading. So they don't, so that we're very thoughtful about what those scenarios mean, what this plays out like, the transition as we're looking at Ocotillo and Sierra. How do we make sure that transition from first to second occurs smoothly? What do we do? How do we make sure that when we move into middle school, what does that look like? Does it look like content? How do we make that happen? We get them to Sunnyside and we move them into academies and some of those structures. So really being disciplined and being thoughtful, because our passion often makes us want to go faster, and I'm a high dive person, and so for me, it's funny, they're always joking around, like, you're the one who's saying, be careful, but it is because we went down this path and successfully. I mean, one of the really key things, and Mr. Crouch, you alluded to this, is the success that comes from kids who are biliterate, and our kids at Amigos began to outperform our straight English kids over and over again. And that happened through middle school when they went on to Sierra. That happened when they went to high school. So we know what the power of this is. We just have to think about it in a new context. Steve talks about educology a lot, and where do we sit with this, and how do we make sure that we can jump through all those hurdles and make those rounds. So we're really excited to start that. We don't know exactly yet what the speed of which we can do that is. We need to think about curriculum. We need to think about, because we use OER curriculum, remember, so we don't pay for our ELA curriculum or our math curriculum. Maggie has done a great job with teachers putting that together. So we need to think that through. We need to be able to say, what's the continuity between those curricula? You know, how do we make sure that kids aren't, because we've seen that happen, and we've seen other false starts in dual language programs, and oftentimes they came because we didn't think all the way through those logistical pieces. So it is super exciting. So excited to see it come back around. And just really the process of the team thinking through all the what ifs and all the yeah buts, so that when we move it at scale, we do it well.
Ms. Dawn?
I don't, know what curriculum you're going to be using, and I don't know if this one will be, but I really like this curriculum for a couple of reasons. First of all, at the very beginning of our board meeting, we had a recognition here from TEP, and the reason was because we were teaching our students conservation and the footprints that they leave in the global world. And this is exactly the same thing. And so that's one of the things we're teaching our children. Reduce, reuse, recycle, which we hear about a lot. But the other thing that I like about this is something that they can easily talk to their parents about. The family, not just the parents, but the siblings can become part of this conversation. And the language that is being used, the language that is being learned, is not just the child learning it, but the entire family learning it. So I think this is a great book.
And some of the other topics, which is really cool, because right now, we're working on, oh my God, I can't think right now. Okay, before this one, we were studying trees. So it kind of, right before, winter break, so we were studying trees, and a lot of what is with the Coyote Pups, with our PDG grant, you have to be engaged as a parent. That's part of the contract that they sign. So we have parents, every day we see them because they have to sign in, they have to sign out their kids, they transport their kids, they have to go on field trips with their kids. We just went to the rodeo on Tuesday, and it was like 37 degrees, and I had every single parent with their child there. And it was, so they have to be engaged, so that's why we're talking about the parent component, getting them excited, not just about the two languages, but, we have trees, and then, the curriculum that we have, we don't get through in a year. These units can go on forever, and we can always come back and take the way. And, we incorporate, art projects into them. The parents, bring in, like for the recycling, we're already collecting stuff. We're collecting aluminum cans and stuff because we're going to make flowers. We're going to paint them. So there's a lot, like you guys said, and then we're already preparing for, not just teaching the students about it, but like you said, teaching the parents. So we have a lot of communication with the parents, and and we can always, close. That's what we're saying right now. Close. So right now, like in my little casita, in the interest areas, they have an ironing board. You should hear these kids. They're ironing little baby clothes. They're going on with the little caretita, and they're speaking. And what's great about it is they're already building both languages. And what amazes me, just being in kinder and up, where I feel like sometimes we're forced to make kids speak English. In preschool, we don't force them to speak either language, and they're learning so much English without me telling them to do it. And I think of my Isabela when we were in the little water table, and I accidentally put in macaroni thinking it was fake macaroni, but it was real. So it gets all yucky, she's all touchy, she goes, disgusting! I'm like, oh my God, what did you get? These words that are coming out of their mouth, that they're hearing other kids say. So the vocabulary they're learning, and that's from each other. Yeah, they're learning it from me too, but we're sitting on the carpet reading books in English and Spanish, and when those that were only Spanish speakers are helping those that are only English speakers so that they understand what we're talking about, the art projects that we incorporate. So, just watching it happen, I can't even imagine actually implementing a true dual language program starting at that age, with 4-year-olds, because some of them are 3 coming in, turn 4, and now turn 5, and you're just like, these kids they're crazy. Oh my gosh. And that's without a true dual language program. So I'm excited.
Mr. Armill?
I'm excited too. And the reason I say this is refreshing to hear, because when some of us started school years ago and did not know the language, it's either sink or swim, right? Unfortunately. And like Mr. Cart says, it's good. Absolutely, what he's saying is so true to do a dual language, even a trilingual program, because it's power. You're empowering our kids at a very young age versus getting your mouth out washed out with ivory soap, which I hate to this day. And that's what used to happen to us. If we spoke Spanish in class, hey, come here. And that's a true story. And I still, Mrs. Brooks was her name. I still hate it to this day. Yeah. I'm talking about 50-some years ago, okay? So, and that's what's in your mind. And what we're doing with the kids now, how amazing is that?
Yep.
Totally amazing. Thank you.
Good story. Well, obviously, Ms. Quintero and I were both blown over by the presentation.
I think, the other piece to it that we learned is that, and Mary and Julie talked to it, is the family engagement piece. A lot of the work when we started this was built off Luis Moll's Funds of Knowledge work, and he was actually an integral part, that was at Los Amigos all the time, and so our staff had the benefit of growing in that mindset of what everybody brings, into the schoolhouse, and what everybody brings to the table. And I had forgotten how in-depth we had gotten, and we had even trained our front office staff. To the first time, remember, we had a lot of money, we took them to the audit conference in California, and we brought our front office staff, because we needed a voice, we needed ownership, we needed passion and excitement from the second they came in. Our parents were incredibly involved. In fact, many of our parents went on to become the PIAs of the district. Many of those parents from dual language kids are office support staff, we see them all over, and it was really transformational what happened with them as well. We use this as we talk about bringing in enrollment and making people excited about what we do. There is a level of commitment. We did ask parents to commit, because you need the longevity in the program to see it through. Because you do see some ebbs and flows within, and it gets a little scary, like, our kids should be farther than this. You have to stay the course. And so there is on our part thinking through, really explaining the commitment that we need parents and families to make to the program over that course of time, in addition to teachers. And the beauty of it is, and Mary alluded to this, the beauty of the teacher pairing pieces is you don't have to have all teachers who are bilingual. We had all kinds of mixtures. I had two sisters who taught. I had an English speaker, actually one of Carmen's partners one time. She was the Spanish side, one was the English side. We had every possible combination you could imagine over that course of time. So the possibilities, not just for our kids and their families, but for our staff, are really, really powerful. So we're excited about this, but we're being very, very careful that we think through all of the pieces so that we get a really strong start, and we have something that we can scale, once we get it going, that we can scale quickly.
Mr. Holmes?
I just wanted to highlight a few points. I just want to make sure to thank the team about the idea of bringing high school credit with Spanish at the 8th grade. I think is a brilliant move to begin kind of valuing that second language, the idea of a seal of biliteracy, which again is the value statement as we're making about second language. To your point, I thought we were going to start a movement of outing these oppressive teachers here. I can see a hashtag, a creative hashtag here about outing oppressive teachers from the speak sounds. Okay, we'll think about one clever one. But the other idea is still doing what's right when it comes to SEI instruction, even though we know the state is going to do, quite frankly, the opposite. And they've proven that time and time again when it comes to supporting English language learners, going back to the English-only movement in 2000, which kind of went hand in hand with No Child Left Behind, right? So we've got, almost 2 decades worth of kind of policy and practices that actually have run counter to creating good practices for English language learners, one from a policy perspective of not valuing the second language, another from an accountability movement, which made it real difficult to create structures of freedom that allowed for some risk-taking when it came to some of these programs. Those still are in play, so it's, I got to kind of call that out. Why there's reservation is not because I think there's a will and a great commitment for it, is that we've got some structures that still prohibit some of those things from happening in a real way. And the times changed, right, before. As those of you that were the top pre-2000, there's a much different space. The idea of what the standards are, what the curriculum, the tightness of that presents some challenges as we're moving forward. I'm still trying to see how do you translate learning intention success criteria in Spanish, so that we put that on the board, right? And so that's, but those are just, I don't want this to be seen as a lesser than program as we're moving forward. It's got to be equal, because we know we have that value. Therefore, there is a little bit more reservation, but for good reasons, not because we're worried. We're more worried that we don't want to mess it up, right? And so that's kind of what you see, a little bit more patience on the front end. And thank goodness for people like Mary Martinez, who's there, who's willing to take the risk and has done it before, and has a much more open space to play around, right, than she would if she was in kinder. Right, so there's, I think, some things that are happening that give us some proof points to move to scale, but I don't want to ignore also the fact that we have other things at play that are valuing the work of our second language learners that are equally valuable to what we're doing with our dual language programs. So thank you, team.
One quick
Mr. Hamel.
And Pam, what you said is so true about taking ownership. Not have the people buy into it, but take ownership. And I think that's one of the key words that we have to utilize.
That's honestly, that's the make or break.
Yeah.
And it has to be ownership.
Ownership.
Because it's a lot of work. And it's also this piece that we have to be careful in, that we value all of our teachers and all of them, whether the SEI or they're the dual language or they're the mainstream English or whatever they are, that it's all about the kids. And so when we have to also watch our own passion, that it's not one for the other. To this piece, it's like every one of our kids deserves our absolute best piece. And it's Carmen talking about, what do we do about our reclassified kids? We look at that data, and when it's not where it needs to be, then we got to be better at that too. And so it is that piece, but it is to do a lift like this is ownership.
Yep.
It's not buy-in, it's ownership.
Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez, do you have any questions? Isn't it? Okay. I'd just like to say something too before you leave, Pam. We've got to remember that this is our number one measurement tool. Is this better for the kids or not? If it is, we should go forward. I tend to be a little bit probably less risk adverse than some. I think we should, shouldn't have the brakes on too much. I think we should go forward as quickly as we possibly can and do it right. I'm not advocating that we don't, but this is better for our children, and we should really go forward with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next, I think we're doing the college entrance data.
This is mine. This is yours. This is mine.
Good evening, President Crouch, Superintendent Holmes, members of the board, and members of the audience. Thank you for allowing us to present some information today on post-secondary planning. Specifically, in regards to some graduation data, post-secondary data, excuse me, and probably most importantly, our student feedback from the data. So let me start, get this going, here we go. So let me start by sharing a little bit of our graduation data here. These are 4-year graduation rates. And obviously, we've been charged by the goals and expectations to graduating our students. And as you can see, there's definitely some positive trends at the comprehensive high schools here compared to the state. If you start on the far left, those are the state trends over the last 4 years. And then our district trends are the second column there. And then Desert View High School and Sunnyside High School respectively. But as you can see, our graduation rates are pretty solid. I mean, we're never obviously satisfied with the work. We want to continue to increase those numbers, but we've definitely put in some good work in terms of graduation. One of the questions we ask ourselves is what happens to our students after they graduate, of course, right? Because we definitely push college and career graduates, and there's several questions that goes along with that. What does that look like, and what are our students telling us when they do take surveys? We're part of the College Going Initiative grant, where there's 18 school districts, there's 79 high schools, and this past May, Desert View had 225 seniors who responded to this survey, and Sunnyside had 140 seniors who responded to this survey. Definitely we want to make sure we capture more of our students taking this survey, but this is a survey, these are the amount of students that took the survey this past May. And the survey covered different pieces. It addressed those categories there that you see in front of you: barriers, academic motivation, support from families, school friends, their aspirations, parental supervision, family background, FAFSA college applications, and what assistance they have. Obviously, this is extremely valuable feedback of what we think we know and what students are really saying to us. So on this next slide, I want to share the student aspirations here. The question was, how far do you think you will continue your education? So as you can see, DV had 92% and at Sunnyside 95%. One of the things I want to point out is take a look at those bottom three there, from graduate, from college, to obtaining a master's or equivalent, to a PhD or advanced degree. You can see that at Desert View we have about 66.8% of the students stating that they plan to go that far with their education, and at Sunnyside 76%. So that's obviously it's a nice message, and it's good to hear that our students do have those aspirations to continue on to post-secondary education. One of the major pieces is obviously the free application for federal student aid, our FAFSA applications. And as you can see here in this next slide, we surveyed our students, asking them how many of them submitted their FAFSA application. And as you can see here at Desert View, there was 43.6%, and at Sunnyside 62.9%. Not nearly enough of our students that should be applying. And that's one of the pieces we learned, and we said, you know what, we got to do something about that. We got to make sure that we're reaching our students and we're carrying out that message that it is important for them to fill out their FAFSA. A little bit, if you read down with some of those other results, a little bit more pleasing in terms of how many of you have submitted a college application. And again, at Desert View 81%, at Sunnyside 73%. Then it goes on to ask, have you submitted one college application, and then two, and then three, and then obviously some of our schools do go some of our students go the vocational route. Some of them are applying for 2-year, and then obviously the 4-year universities there. So our students, again, what is this telling us? Our students are applying for colleges. These numbers, we definitely need more students applying for FAFSA, but they are applying for colleges. So as we started this school year, we spoke to our high schools, and we said we got to come up with a plan to make sure that we're having more students applying for FAFSA, and we got to identify what are those barriers and why aren't they applying for FAFSA. So at Desert View, they had the theme of FAFSA Fiesta, so we definitely had a theme there going on in terms of creating time during the day for seniors to fill out their applications, and obviously we made sure there was assistance there, and we partnered with Pima Community College, the Regional College Access Center with MEC, and we made sure that we created that time during the day. At Sunnyside, they called them FAFSA Friday, so different themes, but again, both with the same intent to increase the numbers. And this is huge for us here. Why is this important? Obviously, many of our kids need the financial assistance, but in addition, the research tells us that 90% of our high school seniors who complete FAFSA attend college directly from high school, compared to the 55% of FAFSA non-completers. In that third bullet, it also states that FAFSA completion is strongly associated with post-secondary completion. 52% of FAFSA filers complete a bachelor's degree within 6 years, compared to the 44% of non-filers. Also, something to point out is this is definitely now part of our A through F accountability system. So the state definitely is tracking which students are applying and which students are not applying.
Mr. Gustavo?
Yes.
Quick question. Do we know how, I'm not sure how to ask this. Do we have an idea how many of the students aren't applying for it because of their status?
Sure. So, and he's got some other data he's going
Right.
to share with you as well. What part of this, we almost used an RTI model with financial aid. Basically, we looked at what we've done before is we've always done sort of a universal tier one. Hey, everybody, we're going to do these segues. You should all apply. Come in, we'll have a parent night, etc. What the big shift was this year is we still did that, but then we tried to tier the support that students needed. So a questionnaire was sent out to all of the students, and there was a general question about what concerns do you have about filling out the application? And so there were concerns listed like, parents might not want to sign it, difficulty filling it out, have trouble getting the tax information, and residency was just one of many things that was listed. So more students actually kind of came forward with that, and then the intervention for them was referring them to Scholarships AZ. While they can't address that problem, they have a lot of expertise in putting on workshops to try to help our students apply for private scholarships that will support students who are having residency concerns. And so the counselors were sensitive to that as well. So it's a little more information than you asked. The estimate for specifically for DACA students was only about 15 students per campus. But that also has a lot to do with the fact that you can't really apply for DACA until you're 16. And it is, I think, $450 was the last thing each time that you apply. And really, people have not been putting in new applications since roughly November of last year. So,
Go figure.
so we do, yeah. So we do have a larger population that isn't in that ability for DACA either. So, and that number I don't specifically have.
Thank you.
So I wanted to share these numbers. When we attended the Helios ACT conference in early February, they shared data with us in terms of our FAFSA completion for this school year. And if you look at this slide here, January 2018, we've already had 164 students at Desert View and 169 students at Sunnyside that have completed it entirely. And compared to last year, where we had 113 at Desert View and 133 at Sunnyside in January 2017. So those are definitely some nice increases, at 45% for Desert View and 27% for Sunnyside. The next slide talks in regards to those students who have started it but have not yet completed it. They haven't submitted it. So if you add up these numbers, the 196 at Desert View, again, compared to last year at 128, and at Sunnyside 193 compared to 155. But if we add up the ones from the last slide, those are already completers. And once these students complete, we would have nearly 90% of our high school students that have completed FAFSA. So those are definitely some promising results. Obviously, the key is making sure that, you know, this other 40% of our students make sure that they complete. So one of the things, when you asked the question earlier, was, you know, and I asked myself, what prevents our students from submitting this information? And some of the pieces we came up with is they feel they're ineligible for financial assistance. Another piece is parents haven't or don't file taxes. And the last piece is just accidental pieces where they don't go through their application correctly or submit or are missing a signature. So those are some of the key pieces that we're definitely addressing, and the reason for the campaigns obviously is to increase the number of FAFSA applications completed, but also learning from those sessions what are the barriers and what are the issues of why they're not completing. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over here to Ms. Utter, and she'll continue here with this next slide.
Mr. Arbo?
Yes, thank you. When is the cutoff date? Is there a cutoff date for submission for FAFSA?
There's usually a priority deadline, which is what you tell the kids is Valentine's Day.
Okay.
The other change that enabled us to do some of this work is that the government changed to what they call prior year, so you didn't have to wait for your W-2 forms to come out in February, end of January to do it. You could actually start filling it out in the first semester using your tax form starting in October, using the prior year. So what that did for school counselors and for other groups that are assisting us is it allowed them to begin working with students in October instead of waiting until the end of January. Saying, "Cookies, now you got to do it now." And people are saying, "But my parents haven't done their taxes." And they're like, "But you tell me they have to tell them I have to do it so that we can turn in financial aid." So we have a larger window, and that helped a lot. But I do think it was a very intentional process as well. Because we know that it's a factor that leads to increased enrollment. I mean, that's clear not just in our community, it's clear across the country. So knowing that, we wanted to begin by looking at some more of the perception data, because I don't think this is data we've ever shared with you before, and I'm not sure it's data we've ever really collected. So I'm grateful to the Helios Grant for doing this work for us. Remember, these were seniors in May, the very beginning of May, so they pretty much knew what they were going to do at the time they left us. And we have a little data here for you about their concerns about what are you worried about? What do you think the barriers are going to be? You saw a really high population of the students who filled it out who said they were going to continue their education. So the top barriers that they identified, not surprising, is they're all worried that there's not going to be enough money or that the school or program is going to be very expensive. Across the board, both high schools, that was by far the greatest barrier for them. I tried to list the top ones. They're not terribly high, but we've had some conversations, and Mr. Gastelum and I are going to be meeting with the school principals as well and talking about some of these. You know, obviously a little concerning, school is too stressful. Interesting to us that some of them were just saying lack of motivation. I may not just want it bad enough. I may decide that there's something else I want to do, which is okay, but I hope they haven't borrowed a lot of money to get through a program and they decide there's something else that they want to do. So that's key to some of the recommendations we're going to make later on. What are they not worried about? Well, barriers that were on the survey that got a very low response, our students are not really worried about being discriminated against because of gender or ethnicity. Our students are not really worried about not fitting in or the fact that they may be the first in their family to go to school. They're pretty confident that they're going to be able to do this as long as they have the financial support to do so. And if anybody ever is concerned that our parents are not supporting our students, only 5% of Desert View kids, 2% of Sunnyside kids worried that their parents would not support their plans to go to college. So we thought that was interesting data for you to have as well. And then it also asked some questions about who supported you. And there were these 6 general areas that they asked about your family, your school, and your friends. Did they help you do well? Did they motivate you to stay in school? Have they been important in helping you to make educational plans? And the 2 schools were a little bit different in the responses. And remember, the sample size was a little bit different. And we, like Mr. Gastelum said, we need more students completing it this year. But almost across the board, Desert View students said their family and their school and their friends were all very supportive of them. Across the board. almost even with helping them do well. Thought the school actually more felt that they were able to, the school helped them, give them good advice about their education. But of course, it's their parents who care most about their education, even though they felt the school did as well, and their friends did. Sunnyside's data is still fairly high, but a little greater discrepancy between them, a little more variance. I think they perceive their family as being the most supportive. At Sunnyside, friends were a little more supportive than they saw the school was. So again, this is the kind of data we're going to go over with the principals to try to figure out, and maybe student focus groups as to, you know, tell us a little bit more about this as we look at this particular data. So given all of that, those students from last year said they wanted to go to school, they weren't too concerned about barriers. I don't have all of the 2017 cohort data. I got to go back a year, the 2016 cohort data. But this is the enrollment data for the class of 2016. It's college enrollment data based on enrolling at any time after the first year from their high school graduation. So this is from the National Student Clearinghouse. We upload all of our graduates, and then they track any college who gives them information on who enrolled with them, and then they're able to give us back these reports. The big jump there is because Pima Community College was not reporting their data until 2011. So it looks like we had an artificial gain there, but Pima Community College has made substantial changes. And you'll see some of that in the data as well. So overall, from the cohort of 2016, 52% of our students enrolled in schools somewhere after they left, after they graduated us. So where was the somewhere? Sorry, I know this is hard to read. It's 52% overall, 36% enrolled in a 2-year institute, 16% enrolled in a 4-year institute. Not a lot of variance over the 8 years that you can track on this here. And so then the question is, what do we make of that? So we tried to look at a couple of the variables. Thank you. Okay, and so some variables that I suspect come to your mind. Well, tuition. So the data that I was able to pull has increased by 370% in the past 15 years. The second one takes inflation into consideration. So at a 4-year institute in Arizona, the increase has been 83% after adjusting for inflation from 2008 to 2015. So when you looked at those data, it's kind of interesting to me that we've maintained sort of the level, even despite that kind of increase in tuition here in Arizona. Proposition 300, where the state said you have to show residency, is the word they used in Arizona, actually passed in November 2006. It really didn't begin to have much of an impact until 2008. ABOR, Arizona Board of Regents, changed the admission requirements a little bit to an assured admissions process in 2010. Doesn't seem to have much of an impact, and it was 2013 that Pima Community College, I think Mrs. Dong was there that night, when they voted to approve in-state tuition for students who had, who are for our DACA students. So that was in 2013. So if you haven't sent someone to college recently, there's just a quick snapshot. Yes, Pam keeps saying, yes, I have one in school now. So, you know, when you look at the comparisons, yes, U of A is a whole lot more expensive than Pima Community College is. But there's some other factors that you need to consider in as well, and one of them is persistence. So how do our students do? Once they get there, do they stay? Or are they sort of a one and done type of situation? So this is the persistence data for the class of 2015 as to how many of them returned for a second year. Those students who went to a 4-year school, 87% of them returned for a second year. The national persistence across the board is 73%. Our students average 73% returning for a second year. The 2-year is usually much lower, and it is lower for us too. Only 65% of our students return for a second year. But again, that's higher than the national average at a community college as well, where I think a lot of students who are not sure what they want to do go to take some classes. And then so they just don't have as high of a persistence rate. Where we begin to need more data, and Mr. Castellan's going to close on this in just a few minutes, has to do then with completion. So I do have a little bit of data for you. What the Clearinghouse does is it tracks how many students earn degrees over a 6-year period of time. We started subscribing to the Clearinghouse in 2011, was our first cohort. We went back a couple of years. So I don't have a lot of 6-year data for you, but you can see we have about 113, 111, 105 over that 6-year period of time from that graduating course who complete a degree. But the Clearinghouse only gives us completion for an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or an advanced degree. So one other thing before I turn it back over to kind of where we're going to go from here, when we look at that trajectory over time, I also thought this was important. This is off Pima Community College's research website. This is Pima Community College's decline in enrollment since they peaked at that 35,000 in 2010. They had their enrollment overall at Pima Community College has dropped consistently year after year after year. But our enrollment, this is the same slide you saw before, our enrollment at Pima Community College actually has increased over that period of time. And then when you look at University of Arizona, because again, I can give you lots more data here. We send very few students out of state. We send a handful. Usually we can name them. Pam and Deborah would say, that was my valedictorian. But most of them either matriculate at Pima or the U of A. The vast majority do. So you see sort of the same trend. The blue line, the bottom line is in-state students to the University of Arizona, pretty flat. They are taking in more out-of-state students. I'm sure there's some economic demand for that as well for our colleagues at the university. So we are flat or we are maintaining, despite a lot of odds. Our students seem capable and focused and being able to persist at the university level. So what can we influence and what do we have less influence? Mr. Costello is going to close on some next steps as far as those questions are concerned.
So some of the factors to follow, obviously, is these 4 factors here. The first 3 is we definitely have a substantial influence over the first 3 pieces here. Admissibility, students who have taken the courses required for college admission that have a GPA of 2.5 or higher, and obviously that is now part of our 8th through F accountability system. Those who applied, I mean, we create those opportunities for our students to, in the school day again, for those students to apply to colleges. Those that have been admitted to 4-year universities, we definitely get those reports from our state colleges. But the final factor is obviously the most challenging one. Those students who have matriculated to post-secondary education, I mean, that comes down to a lot of decision-making with students and their families. But we can definitely provide a lot of pieces there and lead them in the right direction to apply for colleges and be accepted. The next slide, and I'm sure you're familiar with it as members of ASBA, is Achieve 60, ensuring that 60% of Arizonans have a certificate or college degree by the year 2030. Let me point out that our 2030 graduates are our kindergarten students right now. So as we align with Achieve 60, what do we still need to know? Obviously, we need to get, you heard about 53% of our students are going on a post-secondary education. So that we have to ask the question, what's happening to the other 47% of our students? We're definitely getting some data in terms of those students going on to military right after graduation. And we know we have a percentage of students with a strong ROTC program at Desert View that are moving on. Also, how many of our students are going into the Pima Community College 2-year programs? And lastly, how many of our students are earning those industry certifications and going on to pursue those opportunities? So, our goal setting is obviously we want to have 60% of our students enrolled by 2021. These are our current freshmen, so we can support them by definitely through our college and career academies, by guiding students to career pathways and post-secondary planning, helping them out with that planning, providing career awareness opportunities for students in grades 7 through 9, and I know we just had our 8th graders visit our college and career academies at both Sunnyside and Desert View. And also strengthening our school support and higher expectations, which is also a crucial piece. And as stated in the very first slide when we talked about graduation rates, we're graduating our kids. Now, we got to definitely make sure that we're assisting them through this process. And I think with some of the pieces that we've put in place for FAFSA, that's a great start. And we got to be able to identify some other barriers that are there for our students and make sure that it is a smoother process for them as they apply for post-secondary education.
Mr. Holmes?
I just want to make a comment just to kind of highlight why this presentation was very important for us to give. It's, if we're going to set the stage and have a vision for college and career ready, then we have to find metrics that actually allow us to determine whether we're meeting our vision, right? And so the graduation numbers don't tell us that story. They tell us one part, and we have to reiterate the work that we've been doing at the high school so that we can begin to find metrics that are appropriate. I mean, this 60%, I mean, that's 60% getting there, and if you look at our rate of kids staying for year 2, that's far below the Arizona standard of 60% actually getting a degree. And so these are kind of bare minimum steps that we're looking at, but at least we're starting to set some metrics that are going to give us some data that we feel better about when it comes to what we're doing with what our students are doing after they leave us, and which if we really did our job. And that's the big challenge ahead. I think I applaud the team because we're looking at the data much more differently than we have in the past, which was kind of somewhat of looking at the deficits associated with the work and not looking at what we've done to really accomplish the work. In other words, we have a pretty long trend of sending kids to college. Right, I mean but we don't talk about those things, right? We don't have these formal discussions to begin to say, is it working or not working? And so as we're upping our game in this new iteration of the work, we'll come before you much more with some metrics that I think we're going to start trying to tease out as we're looking more specifically at the data that's available for us, the anecdotal data as well. But the bare minimum, as you can see, that all kids, we should have as standards, everyone should complete a FAFSA. I mean, as simple as that sounds, I mean, it's been on our radar, but that hasn't been like the major push because we've had all these other interventions to put in place to get kids across the stage, right? And so we forget about these things that are meaningful as we try to make sure our kids are successful. But I think we have to start setting a higher standard for what kids are leaving our district prepared to do.
Well, it seems to me like this will help us a lot too when we're establishing our graduate profile and really understanding what it means and not just setting a number, but what's the effect of setting that graduate profile the way we do.
Exactly.
Ms. Stone?
Just a couple of things. First of all, it was very interesting to see, the statistics as far as Pima Community College is concerned and how we are doing really well as far as sending our students over to Pima Community College. I think there might be a couple of different reasons for that, but one of them, of course, I think is our CTE classes. The students start to learn the meaning of the accreditation and getting that certificate and knowing that they can then go on either right into careers and or going straight to Pima College and getting a few more credentials. And some of them are doing both. They're going into a career and then in the evenings taking more classes to get the further credentials. So I think we're really helping Pima Community College quite a bit with that. That being said, we work really well in partnerships with the U of A. They do so much for us. It's just incredible. I'm really glad and grateful to the U of A and on all the partnerships that we have. And other universities here and there also, lend support. But the U of A has really been instrumental in the things that we have done here at Sunnyside. I think it would behoove us to go to Pima Community College powers that be and talk to them a little bit more about the stats that we have, about the fact that we're keeping them alive and seeing what else we can do as partners. I think some of the things we can really work more with them is the dual enrollment. You know, not just in math or a math class or a language arts class here and there, Spanish class here and there, but what about the dual enrollments in some of those things like the auto mechanic? You know, we did some of that. They can get some accreditation through their auto mechanic, and they can get some credits through PIMA. So that will help our students see that these are PIMA classes, and I'm taking them, and I'm getting credit, and I'm passing. And so, you know, I can just continue going to PIMA as soon as I graduated from Sunnyside. So they have a better understanding. Their parents have a better understanding that it's not impossible to go to PIMA. You know, it's another stepping stone that they have. So I think, and then we used to have, in the past, classes taught, a lot of classes taught at our high schools that were Pima Community College classes in the evenings. That partnership, I think, was great because some students would come back in the evenings to go to the Pima College classes. Parents, family members would go to the Pima College classes that we had at Sunnyside, you know, because it was convenient. It was there. It was easy for them to go to ELL classes, math classes, social studies, psychology classes, all those kind of classes that were there at Pima Community College. There's just so much, I think, that we can do in partnerships with Pima Community College. We've got Desert Vista there now. We used to do these things before we had Desert Vista. We just had a little Ed Center South. And then we grew Desert Vista campus.
One of the things I think that can't be lost upon us is, you know, the implementation of the college and career academies that occurred a couple years ago. We haven't seen the results of that just yet. I mean, that's obviously students are definitely engaged in that and those dual credit opportunities and earning certificates, and this data doesn't capture that, but, you know, as we push forward with college and career academies, I'm sure it's going to definitely come up and show increases there. The other piece is, you mentioned the dual credit opportunities. We've worked with Pima Community College, Ms. Utter and I, and we've met with the individual who's new to Pima Community College, Thomas Cluting, and he's definitely working with us in terms of flexibility and teachers being able to, if they're joining a program, before you had a certain pieces of criteria to teach a dual enrollment class. They're a lot more flexible. If teachers are working on certification, they're going to allow them, they're going to give them a 5-year process to teach the course while they're getting that certification. Is that correct? So we're excited about that because that means more opportunities for not only our teachers teaching dual credit courses, but also more opportunities for students to be enrolled in those classes and getting the dual credit. So I'm glad you bring those two pieces up.
One last thing, and you might want to ask them, is I know that when I was working at Pima College, we had a chunk of money that was scholarships, you know, $50,000, $60,000. And then we, as advisors and counselors, had the opportunity to talk to individual students and say, you know what, I'm going to give you $2,000 for this semester. Those are usually students that did not qualify for FAFSA. And there was no strings attached to these. You know, here's $2,000. They didn't have to have all the other things that FAFSA has to have. So we'll find out if that's still available so that way we can send our DACA students and our other students, you know, to this. I mean, some of those students that got that chunk of money, I see them working here as teachers, you know, in the district. And so I think we find out if they still have that and we can use that. And it's also, the last thing is, it would be very interesting to see, we know because of these new things that are out there, how to track who's going to universities, who's going to, you know, Pima College or any other junior college, but who's going to the military, but maybe a little bit on CTE. But it would be really interesting how, you know, to find out if you're not going to college, you're not going to universities, and you're not going to the military, where are you at? Who are you and where are you at? That, I think, would be really, really interesting to find out. I don't know how you would do that. I think it would take a lot of manpower, but I think it would be a very interesting thing to find out. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I know where they are. They're on the 10-year plan, and that's what they're doing. They're taking, their life is in the way, and they're taking their time getting through college. Some of them take the 5-year plan. You know, it does take a while to get through if they're persistent, and some of them are.
And this data also doesn't capture those students who come out of high school and might take a semester off or take a year off. These are students that, and then enroll. So we do have some students that are trying to figure things out before they commit to something.
A surprising number of the students I get at NAU, all the students I get at the either blended or face-to-face classes are college graduates. Okay, they're from the transition program. But a surprising number of them are from Sunnyside and Desert View, and they perform really well. I'm just, I'm probably biased, but that's okay. No, they really do perform well.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is alternative schedules for transporting students.
Good evening, President Crouch, Superintendent Holmes, and board members and audience. For many, many years, our transportation department has been asked to look at the possibility of changing our bus schedules to allow for a late start for the high schools. And one of the biggest things that we've had to face is the limited resources that we have in regards to not only equipment, but also qualified bus drivers. So Mr. Valdez and his staff have looked at that possibility and have prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I will present to you tonight.
Good evening, President Crouch, members of the board, Superintendent Holmes. I'd like to go through a quick presentation to sort of stir the discussion as to what we did to try to come up with some proposals of what we think we could recommend or that we could present to the panel. So if we go through the first slide, please. Oh, the clicker? Where's the clicker? Right here? Oh, okay. So what we did is we looked at our goals was to deliver high school students in time for class to begin at least at 8:30 or at least as close as possible. We also wanted to develop proposals for discussion using current resources and identification of additional resources as the proposal went through. Some of the challenges that we looked at were the time of delivery of high school students, and then we looked at each proposal and some of the challenges that would be identified as we went through the proposals. So we'll go through the number one. So the process that we looked at is we contacted area districts with starting times of 8:30 and found out how they do their routing, Saudita, TUSD, and Marana. And we looked at how their routing, what their routing model was to attain those. And what we were already looking at is what they're doing there as well. Some of the picking up times, more regional pickup instead of just a shotgun approach where we just send buses out. So compared to their pickup and delivery routing for use in our project, and we're all on the same page. So proposal one, we started looking at it, and we looked at it, and as you know, we currently have 2 pickup times for our elementaries. We have elementary A, which is the elementary schools east of Campbell, and elementary B, which is the other schools west of Campbell. So currently, we pick up our elementary school B schools at 8 o'clock, and high schools are at 6:30 in the morning. Those are our drop-off times. So we would currently need 66 buses for our high schools, but only 27 for elementary B. And so if we did this and just swapped the two, no additional resources would be needed, but for some elementary students, they would end up being picked up at 5:30 in the morning. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So proposal number 2, we looked at no change to elementary or middle school routes. Since delivery of elementary B occurs at 8 o'clock, that would interfere with our proposed high school delivery at the same time. So we would have to require 25 additional buses, and a one-time cost for the buses of over $3.7 million. And then we'd also have to hire The same amount of bus drivers with a recurring cost of approximately $572,000 a yearly. So the first year initial startup cost would be $4.3 million with additional $572 thereafter. So then we go to proposal number 3, and with this one we ended up with consistent bell times across the district. We looked at an elementary drop-off at 7:30 in the morning, middle school drop-off at 8:10 in the morning, high school drop-off between, we think we can get it at 8:45, but we said let's do 8:55 just to be safe for discussion's sake at this point. It would require the boundary changes of just 2 areas, which are currently where we're transporting students across the district to other schools. The delivery of elementary schools would require a total of 75 drivers. So 9 additional drivers would be needed, as well as buses. For a one-time cost for buses would be approximately $1.3 million. Recurring driver costs of $206,000 a year, and initial startup cost of $1.5. What we also found with this one is some of the challenges that we would have is the additional resources are only for the transportation. These 9 buses are only for the transportation of regular ed students. We have not discussed times for exceptional ed, pre-K, or other alternative programs which we would have to look at. We've already started discussions with Dr. Williams and her staff to have them look at some of the times for the exceptional ed and pre-K students to see if they could fall into some of those times where we would not need additional resources other than the 9 drivers that we've already identified. If we can't do that based upon their recommendations, then that would require additional resources other than the 9 buses and drivers. So that's where we started, that's where we ended up, and we just went through and opened up for discussions at this point. Any more questions?
One of the first questions I have is setting these times. I understand you're setting them, the times you're proposing are based off of when you can have transportation occur for the students. But my primary question is, what is best for the students? You know, do we know that an 8:58 or 9 o'clock starting time for the high school is best, or would 9:30 be a better time? You know, how are we determining that? I'm afraid we're almost putting the cart before the horse in the discussion. Mr. Holmes, do you have a?
Yeah, I think part of it was actually putting something on paper to begin dialogue, quite frankly. And I think what they were looking at is just current practices and what schools around us are doing and what their late times are. Because sometimes, unfortunately, because of athletics at the high school level, a lot is dictated by when they get out to be able to practice and then go to games. And so we started, the starting point, quite frankly, was what's the latest start time in high schools right now? And we found that 8:30 is kind of the area that we're looking at, and so that was the starting point for discussion. They moved it all the way to 8:55 just to kind of create some staggering, but it wasn't necessarily based on any other data that was research-driven in terms of performance. It was really first starting with, what are other people doing? What do we even have the capacity to do to begin to kind of just put something on paper to see what our scenarios could look like.
But we're the leader, not the follower.
We are. I'm hoping they would follow us, but AIA tends to be the tail wagging the dog, unfortunately, when it comes to high schools. Yeah.
Mr. Almeida, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Crouch. You know, what is, I know that 2 days out of the week right now, Tuesday and Wednesday being the late day, and Tuesday being the release day. And I know those 2 days are block schedules. But we seem to be doing it then. What's the difference? Which is pretty close to the schedule that you gentlemen brought to us. Is that option 3, I believe? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that option 3. So I don't see really much in change as far as the arrival time, 8:55, and having a start time at 9:30.
The issue that we have at this point It's not even an issue. On Tuesday, when you said it's a late start, it's because we're delivering at 9 o'clock in the morning on those days.
Okay.
So right now, we've already delivered our high school, elementaries, our middle schools and elementaries. So now we just have to deliver the high schools after they're done.
Which is on Wednesdays, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So,
If it works on Wednesdays.
yeah, if it's
why
working
not
on
the rest
Wednesday,
of
why
the
can't it
weeks?
work the rest of the weeks?
Well, what's hurting us isn't just that the time, we can get them in there on time on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
But it's also the coordination for the after-school pickups too. Because we're picking them up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at 3:55.
Yeah, because of the block schedule. Because if they were going a normal schedule, that would be a later release time.
Mr. Holmes?
Just to clarify, Wednesdays is early release for elementary too.
Oh.
So that's the big major diff. They're getting out at 1 o'clock, so we basically just stash, so those buses are available to pick up early. So if the release time stays at the current release time, that's where we have all the buses trying to pick up at the same time. It's the early release that allows us to not have the problems on Wednesdays that we have.
But we don't have to change the schedule for the elementaries, they'll still be getting released well, that's just
But it's
one
not
day.
every day.
One day a week.
It is
Yeah.
one day a week.
That's 1 day a week.
Okay.
I'm sure the teachers will be happy.
Yeah, early release, Monday to Friday.
Morning and the afternoon, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the iterations are good. I think I need to get us off the kind of the thinking. That's kind of when I want to at least start the dialogue to see what some of the scenarios are. Regardless what scenario we choose or how creative we can get, there's some priorities that we need to make for buses and drivers, no matter what, right, scenario. I mean, there's at the very least, if we go to, even being the leaders in the latest start time, we're still looking minimally 9 to 10 buses, right, to try to move in that direction, which is probably the least disruptive in terms of financial, and still kind of, it's consistent with a later time starting with high schools. That does put high schools, though, at, roughly late, probably ending at close to 4. So it is the broader dialogue around after-school activities and what does that really mean for a competitive athletic school to get out at 4 and run enough practices to do. I mean, that shouldn't be the only dialogue that happens, but should be part of our discussion if we get some more direction on how you want us to move forward, particularly because this is certainly of interest to the governing board, but I want, before we invest more time in kind of looking at those, we wanted to use this opportunity to get more direction on, where should we go from here?
Mr. Armo?
And also, what's a concern of mine is the size of the buses that we have in our fleet right now, and what's being utilized, the seats that are being utilized. I mean, we can also downsize our buses and get more buses to meet what we have to do here. Because I've seen there's maybe 5 to 10 students in the bus. And, I mean, it's actually defeating the purpose. Where we could even maybe transport some of those kids or the students in vans.
So,
Can't transport advance.
I know, but I'm just,
Can I comment though, because I think you brought a point that I raised earlier was, by buying full-size, and when we initially kind of repurposed, we could have probably thought differently about the sizes, but it's been, but we looked in, so if we were to try to trade up, or trade down, right? What we get back is like, I mean, what was the last time we auctioned a bus? What's the
I think
resale?
the offer on the high side was $10,000.
You're kidding. And we pay for them, how much is it?
100.
As low as a 135, as high as 160.
Wow. It's crazy.
Good market.
The wrong business.
I think the buses that were, the last ones that we auctioned off, the ones that were just not, the parked there, they're not our new ones, but the ones that we.
Right, the ones I think the last one that we got was right around 3,600 that we got from.
And what year were those?
The historic vehicles.
1989.
Historic vehicle. 77 in
Kind of a reality show.
My 1988.
It's kind of, I just want to point that out because I was asking the same question. Couldn't we just auction those off or kind of do it, but the resale value or the trade-in value, whatever we call it, is ridiculously low what we get back for buses. Now, we could probably, maybe at best, 20 grand, maybe stretching it. Hector's looking at me like, I don't know where we're going to get 20 grand maybe. But it's important to point that out because I think there's assumptions that I was making on, okay, couldn't we, I'm just thinking used cars, right? We just sell one and then go pick one up for cheap. And we are exploring some lease options that there are folks that are looking at different ways in which school districts, kind of like how we do the lease options with lighting, like they'll fix everything, kind of like how we're doing with the restrooms, but there's other companies that are exploring more how you look at buses and improvement of facilities. So we're looking at that where we can maybe look at a lease, no-cost option for those, but there are some procurement issues associated with that we got to be real careful about to make sure that whoever's doing this is meeting the auditor guidelines that we have if we go down that road.
Well, I think it's great that we're exploring this.
Yeah, it is.
And, I think it's a good conversation for us to have.
It is.
So how many working buses do we have right now?
We have approximately 82 buses. And that includes some spares, but that we keep them, they're operational. The oldest being in 1998. We have 2 of those, and then a number of our fleets are 2004s, and then 2007s, and then we have the 2013s.
Do you have, I'm sorry, do you have buses for field trips, especially for field trips, or they're just whoever's available?
No, we don't, and that's one of the things that we want to look at is getting what we call coach buses, where they would be specifically painted white and just used specifically just for field trips and out-of-town buses.
Not white. That's federal prison color.
Yeah.
Well,
No, white.
They'll look like DOC buses.
well,
They're cream. They're like that new Cadillac cream color.
they could be painted whatever color. They just would not have the school markings such as the flashers or the extending arms.
Okay.
Traditionally, in school districts, they're white buses. That's why we call them that.
Mr. Holmes, did you have something else to add?
I did, but then I got lost in the prison. So just some more clear direction. I just want to make sure as we're charging them to explore kind of in depth. This is the first start on it. Is there a preference? I mean, I know there's a research question that was raised, right? What's best for kids? And obviously that with adolescents, the later starts have always been consistently in the research shows that it's better for kids the later you start. I have yet to see like there's a certain time, right? Like, 8:45, 9, where is that? I know they say later better. I think the challenge then becomes how late can you go before kids don't end up going, right? That's
Right.
kind of, and we've been, so there, and we've got a little bit of proof points with the late start on Wednesday, which ironically leads to more tardies on Wednesdays when we start later, right? And that starts at 9. But that's probably a byproduct of parents already leaving for work, right? And they're getting up. Our Beagle's going to school right now, and they fall back to sleep, and parents are already gone. They're like, oh man, I got to get up and go to school, right? I mean, that's a very real dynamic of when is too late, right? And so the sweet spot that I keep kind of thinking is probably around 8:30, 8:45. Seems to be what's most reasonable from being later than the 7 o'clock time. That extra hour actually makes a world of difference, but not being so late that you start working into these weird times when you're trying to schedule transportation. Because, sometimes those early games would mean instead of missing just last period, you're missing 3 periods, right? Because, I mean, it's the the competitive nature of our comprehensive high schools really make it hard to ignore the AIA issues and the athletics that really drive a lot of the work. You saw the gentleman here and Mr. Leon's comment, how important it is, right? So it's weighing out all those options, but so that's just kind of my opinion. It's not a research-driven opinion, but it's one that I think losing some data points, using that 8:30, 8:45 time seems to be the most reasonable. I think getting into the 8:55, 9 drop-off time is getting a little bit too tight for my preference, because that means you're starting school like 9:10, right, which...
Especially with drop-off time right now at 6:30. Right now, it's 6:30 drop-off time. We're looking at 8:45, 8:55 drop-off times, 2 hours. Yeah.
I mean, it could make a world of difference in terms of, so we'll go back and tweak and see if we can get closer to that time, what the implications are for funding, but I don't want that to just be the deal breaker either, right? Because I think we look at, well, we got to buy all these buses. If there are some more ways in which we can look at options for procuring buses, there are no costs, it really then becomes us being more creative with how we run our routes with the number of drivers too.
The drivers, yeah.
We'll get autonomous buses.
Do what?
Ms. Dunn, autonomous.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to do this, as far as schedules and stuff are concerned, but, as far, and all the costs that will come along with it, and hiring more drivers, and I know that's difficulty too, but if there is a possibility, I think it's a good thing to look into and to check to see, what are some possibilities. I don't know, is there a program? Maybe there's not, but when I worked at Pima College, there was a program where the student would come, we figure out which classes, I'd throw it into the program with the times that we wanted to start, and it would just spit out a schedule that had the times and everything, and none of the classes overlapped with one another. The universities, we got that, we always ran into those issues, but at Pima, we had that program. Is there by any chance a transportation program where you just throw in some, all the H's or high schools and?
Well, what we do with our routing program is we have the bell times. So we set the bell times in for the schools, and then that will then help us go through and create our routes.
So you could change the bell times?
Yeah, so we go in and change the bell times. So if we decide we want to do an 8:30 drop-off, all we have to do is go in and change the bell times to 9:15, and then we work with Edgelog, our routing company, and then we'll turn around and
do one of
create
those-
the routes based upon the furthest pickup point, and then work our way in.
Yeah, I think, that's worth a shot, just trying something like that.
My understanding, being super involved in transportation with you guys, is we do have probably a lot more routes than most districts. Stops. Let me make sure, not routes, but stops. We accommodate a lot in our community for different reasons, safety reasons, historical reasons, desert. So that presents a very unique challenge that I think it's not lost on me as we're looking at these routes, because the simple, when the Edgelog system configures, they use what's kind of standard number of stops versus a route, right? So so there's a standard that they'll use, and we kind of almost double that in almost every route because of the accommodations we've made. And when we've tried to kind of eliminate a route, you hear from it, we hear from it. Yeah. There's dogs there, the route, or it's just, so it's interesting as we go through the different ways in which we can route, that we're still a district that accommodates families a great deal for routes, for the right reasons, don't get me wrong, but it is, and our we have a lot of special ed routes, but we also have, our rule is a 1.5 mile rule. The standard is a 2 mile for most districts. So right now, if you're within a 1.5 miles, we give you transportation. A lot of districts have moved to if you're within 2 miles. So I'm not suggesting that we change that at all. I'm just saying that that's what adds to why it's not such a simple thing with us when you look at other other districts where we're trying to compare start times. I mean, you're talking like Saurita or something like that. They started their times based on, and we kind of have inherited a historical years of routing that people have gotten accustomed to. So we'll have to take that on as another challenge if we want to mitigate the amount of buses that we're going to need. But I'm one to say, I mean, I don't think we need to break one system to provide another system in there.
Ms. Quintero?
I just have a question, not a question, but a statement. I really don't like it when our kids are waiting on the corner in the dark. So that is one thing that, wait till the sun rises before you put the kid out there to catch a bus. I mean, it's just really in dark, in winter, cold, no, not safe. Just, 5:30, out of the question, okay? For any high school, little kids, anything, anybody. It's like, no. It's like, but
What's your earliest to pick up right now?
Oh, we pick up some students as early as we have buses leaving to pick up at 5:15. High school kids, yes.
where do they live?
They drop off by 6:30.
If we lived out east.
Class starts at 7:50.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for the
you.
presentation. Appreciate the effort.
I know it's a lot of work. Sorry.
To the drawing board.
Next item on the agenda is school safety. A very pertinent subject.
Yes.
Very important. Sharifa.
Thank you, President Crouch, members of the board, and Superintendent Holmes. As you requested, and because it's a very timely subject, we wanted to engage in a conversation with you about school safety, of some of the things that we have going in Sunnyside, and then also address any questions you may have. And joining me here are our colleagues who are involved in a lot of this is, of course, Javier Baca with technology and all that entails. We also have Deputy Ryan Powell. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to meet him in person, but I know he's been around, and I asked him to be here because he's incredibly important to our district as the only SRO that we have right now in our district. He's at the county schools, but he also collaborates a great deal with TPD and with our other colleagues. Of course, Mr. Gastelum, who is if Frank's absence is one of our incident commanders, as is Pam Benton. We have a number of people who serve in that role and who communicates with Victor Mercado, who's also very important. He's a communicator to the incident command team and keeps, of course, the superintendent, the board, and updates the community through Parent Link and the like. So these are the things, and I'm going to actually turn a lot of this over to them, but these are some of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of protocols. What protocol have we established to report a certain incident? And each school has an emergency incident plan that's pretty extensive, but we also have a quick protocol that we're going to show you that just so that at a glance people remember, okay, who am I supposed to call first? What do I do first if there's an emergency? Other than 911, what do I do? And we don't have to make 18 calls, but there should be, one point of contact, and then it's either Frank Morales, who's not here, who's been very instrumental in our school safety program, but then that communicates through Victor's office, so that's very important. We'll talk about technology. Mr. Baca will address the issue of security cameras and other technology that we have in place. And then threat assessments. I know Deputy Powell serves a lot with the schools where the school will contact him. The principal will contact him. He can look into the issue right there and then at the school and then say, okay, what have we got here? And then if there is, unlike the SRO program that the Arizona Department of Education has, where it really significantly limits what an SRO can do in the school. Deputy Powell kind of serves in many ways, and so I want him to address that, and also to help with threat assessment. TPD also does that. How do we ascertain whether or not a threat is real? And whether somebody posts something on Facebook, or whether it's something that a student says, or how do we determine, or post a picture, if that's a real threat or not? The training and practice drills, and also talking about discipline, what are some of the disciplinary procedures that we have? And I noted in there some policies that sort of govern how we discipline students and for making even things like a threat, and then future enhancements that we could talk about. So I want to start with the protocol of how this is something you can't, I'm sorry it's so small, but the left side of it is what the school does, and the right side is how it funnels through this office and to whom. So Mr. Gastelum, do you want to address a little bit about the protocol? Because you're incident commander now in Frank's absence. So up through spring break, Mr. Gastelum will be serving as incident commander. And if for some reason Mr. Gastelum has to be out, the next incident commander is Pam Benton, because she's lived through every incident over the years. We've lived through everything. She's probably lived through it, so.
It's called experience.
I got to start by saying how much I appreciate Mr. Morales and the work he does. A lot of these incidents really, he takes care of behind the scenes and always ensures the safety of our students and definitely our community. So let me speak a little bit to the flow chart. In the last couple of days, obviously with what's gone on, in Florida, there's been a lot of calls and alerts, and people are doing a pretty nice job of reporting things, even though that some of them may be joking around. It's definitely something we do need to look into in terms of threats. But anytime there's any type of incident that occurs, I usually get a call from the site principal, and they explain to me what's going on, in terms of, I had to make a call because we had this type of threat or whatever's going on. At that point, I make sure to notify Mr. Mercado, who sends out a notification to the incident command team. So it's pretty seamless in terms of the communication. I give him the details, and he sends it out, and it lets the whole incident command team know what's occurring. Obviously, at that point, we are definitely working with law enforcement, whether it be the sheriff's deputies or TPD, and we're working with them to find out what steps are they taking to assist us, whether that be a lockdown, whether they're looking at a threat that was posted on social media. As soon as that comes to a conclusion and they inform us of next steps, again, that gets funneled through Mr. Mercado, and he sends out that information to the incident command team. Some of these incidents are done fairly quickly, where others take a little bit more time, and especially the social media ones. I really gotta stress the social media postings that go up and the threats. Those take a little bit more time to identify who all is involved, because what we definitely want is to make sure that it gets addressed, and that we let the officers do their work in finding out what's going on with these incidents. But in terms of flow chart, that's basically what happens. It definitely provides us with information to identify next steps. If we have to go to the site, if it's something that occurs late at night, we're in contact with the principals, we're in contact with the incident command team here to create a plan for the next day if it's something that occurs at night. If it's something that's occurring, for example, a lockdown during the school day, again, we're in definitely contact with law enforcement. We're communicating to the site principals who are usually the incident commanders on site. and just giving them information on where we're at with different situations. Needless to say, we know, your 911 situations are all different and they're all unique, so they're all handled a lot differently. But in terms of this flow chart, I mean, the most important piece is really that seamless communication, letting everybody know on the incident command team what's going on.
So I had just posted some policies, and this is what guides us. And one of our exhibits, of course, is our discipline matrix. So when a student is suspended, when there's a violation, it's usually a violation of one of these policies. If it's a threat, it's going to be these policies. And then in the discipline matrix, then it talks about what kind of discipline. In the policy, it says that it can be up to a year of suspension, depending on what the situation was for a student threatening an institution. So, or it could be worse. And so students know that the consequences are written down, parents know, and they're swift when it comes to, even when students are joking around. Well, I was just kidding. We don't kid around about, and we take that very seriously. I mean, obviously, we are not about just suspending students, but when it comes to threats and things like that, we take them extremely seriously, even if it's just made in, quote, jest. So I just wanted to point that out. So we have discipline matrix is levels 1 and 2 are the most severe. We also have threat assessments. I'm going to let Javier talk a little bit about the. I don't see.
Ms. Dong has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just the slide just before that, and the one before that also, both of them actually, we were talking about the threats and our policies. And I know, I think we have some really good policies that you've helped put in place. My only concern right now is, I know also that you have a very good working relationship with the juvenile court system.
Yes.
My only concern is that sometimes we follow our policies and we get them out of our schools and we think that they're going to be, taken care of at the juvenile court center as far as also being very tough on these kind of things. But from what I understand, our last one that was at Apollo and Star,
Right.
that was a very serious one.
Yeah.
It involved quite a few students, it involved a lot. And we really handled it, I think, really well here. From what I understand, it went into the juvenile court. And my understanding is that nothing was done at that point. So my concern is that we have this child who's now very angry with us, who did that in the first place, and is now very angry with us, didn't get any discipline over there. It's probably in our community. That's a concern.
Yes, it is. It is a concern, and we continue to work, although the juvenile court has attempted to reduce the number of students who are incarcerated.
And I understand that.
But still, they are, how that ended up coming about that way was a surprise to us.
And I agree with the reductions of the detainees in their, and there's so many other things that they're brought in for that thankfully they're not anymore, the shoplifting, stuff like that. But there are certain things that we need to, I think, maybe in your conversations with them, get them to understand that these are serious things. You see what's going on around the country. These are serious things. What that young man did was serious.
And when we talk about were there signs that we missed, well, and always where you listen to the news, they say, well, there were signs, there were things that people missed. Well, in this case, it was kind of glaring in front of us, and we were very forthcoming and swift with our consequences. And if you recall, the impact that it had not only on that school, but on the district, where parents were very nervous about sending their kids to school. All it takes is a threat that on something on social media. So you're absolutely right that I think we have to continue to work with juvenile court to see what, we have data sharing agreements and we have continued
Yes.
work with them.
Right.
That we need to see
Thank you.
that we're on the same page. I'm going to put this, give it to Mr., turn it over to Mr. Baca, and then we would like to have Ryan talk a little bit about some of the work that he's doing in the schools and some of the threat assessment that he helps us with.
Thank you, Dr. Favela, and good evening, President Crouch, members of the board, Superintendent Holmes. I'd like to preface this brief discussion around the technological resources that exist in support of safety and how it intersects with what our response to security and safety, with kind of a guiding principle of as my responsibility of overseeing what technological resources exist within the district to support our systems. It's important for us to always remember, I think Superintendent Holmes reflects this concept, that the technology can never replace people. A solution can never replace a well-designed protocol with practically minded people leading and who have a well-designed communication plan. And so we approach it always making sure that we don't seek technological solutions, because I think we'll always find ourselves missing the boat and failing if we put our trust into technological solution. That being said, and we will revisit that in our final next steps discussion too. I wanted to preface that because that being said, it's still vitally important that we provide highly reliable and efficient technological systems, so that when that well-designed protocol with competent people communicating well in response to an incident, they now have more resources and tools and information and access to information than they would have otherwise. And that's what this concept is designed to do. We designed a non-proprietary camera system across all campuses in a way so that we can always be flexible, we can always make adjustments, we're not locked into any one design or any one vendor, and we can respond when issues are needed. We also have a well-established communication with law enforcement, so that if there were an incident, we can provide them access into the camera system. And we have, I won't read off to you, but you can see, I think many of you have seen the design of the system. I feel very confident in assuring you that the system serves a good purpose and can provide the incident command team with information when necessary. But we won't ever, of course, count on that 100%. It's all those other important plan pieces that are important. Our buses have an equally fully functional system that we utilize. 500, almost 600 cameras. I do want to mention that Ocotillo was recently discovered as having deficiency in the number of cameras we need on that campus, and so we are actively putting more cameras on there now. And we do record all of these incidents to digital video recorders that have at least of a 15-day retention window, but in virtually every case, it truly is up to 30 days. We haven't really had a problem with recovering that. So we feel good about the ability to provide that level of access, but it doesn't replace security monitors, it doesn't replace good decisions, and it doesn't replace anything else. And I think many of you have seen incidents across the time when, wow, we got a good video of this, but still, what were the plans and protocols in place? And I think that gets to what the conversation that Sergeant Powell will lead us into in terms of the threat assessment and moving forward with, and also the incident command protocol that is established, and how it's vitally important that be the process that we follow whenever an incident occurs. And so I'll pass it over to Sergeant Powell.
Thank you for the
Deputy Powell. Paul, sorry.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Hey, I just want to say that the Sheriff's Department I've been in the school district now for 3 years, so this is our third school year we've had SROs assigned. We established our SRO unit and we assigned one to Sunnyside. And the Sheriff's Department is very, very happy that we have this relationship. Just the information stuff that we were able to share, our MOUs, training in your buildings, and you guys having everything that we were able to do. Our SWAT and K9 uses your buildings to train. And like you just said about the technology, we've been able to solve crimes using your recordings, your digital recordings. We're able to find things easier. So it's been really amazing. There was an incident on Gallego Intermediate where you had a camera that hits the bus bay right down in Albert. Right across the street was a guy who was dealing meth out of his trailer, and your camera just happened to be sitting right there. We were able to get hours of footage of people walking in and out and making stops, and able to get this guy out of our community, out away from our school. So and that video and this stuff was very, good for for our warrant. The judge is like, yeah, this is good stuff. And so it's things like that we never would have had before if we didn't have that relationship. As far as your instant command flow chart stuff, I think what the relationship we've built is that you get the same guy every single time, right? So I talk to Steve. He knows who I am. We get to know each other. We get a relationship. I talk with every single person here, and they know who I am. We know where we went to high school. They know who my wife is, my kids, everything. So we have this really good bond. Which is really good. It's nice to have the same face every single time. We can talk and we can hash things out. Just today, I was in training today. I wasn't in the district. I had to send a patrol guy over to Gallego. Stephanie Ponce calls me and said, "What the heck happened?" And I'm like, "Well, because you didn't get the same guy." So they're going to handle things how the patrol handles it. So I think it's really good that we have this relationship where we can do things. Another thing that we're very thankful for, too, is our relationship with TPD. I think I'm the only deputy in Pima County that has lunch with the guys in blue on a weekly basis, because it just doesn't happen. Our jurisdiction bound lines, for some reason, it's like a wall. We do not cross each other's boundaries, and I want to really, I think it's a lot to do with Frank and the relationship that you guys have, that we've really kind of broken down those boundaries, and I just say, hey, Tucson's in Pima County, I'm going to help out. And so we've been able to do a lot of that. And I get phone calls from principals and nurses and all kinds of people. Not the report stuff, just hey, Brian, you're a resource, can I bounce something off of you? So those are the resource things of that nature. You guys, their safety security is awesome. I'm really impressed with your security monitors. We do training. I do training with them about every other month. I pull all the high school guys in the morning, and we pull all the elementary and junior high guys in the afternoons on Wednesdays. We usually pick a topic, anywhere from mandatory reporting to, drugs or whatever, and recognitions of stuff. And we just do a real quick 1 hour training. I try to use department resources so they're not always hearing from me. So I'm able to help with that way, which is great. You guys, it took 3 years, but we got gates up in the elementaries, which is great. That was the first thing I did when I came into school, and I walked into Los Niños, and I go, what the heck? These people can just walk right into your classrooms? I know they were built in the 70s, and people didn't think that way, right? So it was a different culture, but we were able to get that through. Same with down with Summit View. I was just amazed that you guys would take that initiative, you passed it, and you got that, and I thought that was great. So we're really impressed. There's a lot more we want to do. I have a training. We do the active shooter training. We do it. Sunnyside was a really big participant last summer. The Sheriff's Department does a whole week. We do a lot of, it's a really good training. It's a live training with bangs and booms and everything, and we use drama students. We're doing that this year again. But Sunnyside wanted their own week, not just go to our week. They said we want our own week. We've committed 150 seats to your school, a whole week at Desert View, and that's going to be the week of June 4th. And so that's going to be an amazing training. I want to invite all you guys to that. I think you guys would really have a beneficial day to come to the school. Desert View drama kids will be our role players in that thing. It's going to be an awesome training. So that's I'm probably missing some stuff, or I'm talking too long. I'm not sure. But if you guys have any questions or anything more, I have a lot more ideas that probably require a lot of manpower and money and everything. But we'll go slow and make it a good district. So.
Any questions from the board?
Want to give us just a couple of those ideas and start thinking about some of them?
No, I don't. I do think that training is important, and I think there's a lot of other training that we can do within the school districts. Just not just for teachers. It seems like I get to go to PDs on Wednesdays, and all I have is it classified staff, right? Or But where are my janitors at? Where's my food service guys at?
Exactly.
You know, where are my parapros and nurses? And so where are those guys at when we're training? It seems like we're only training, I only have that PD time for just them. You know, where's all your other employees? Where are your bus drivers at? You know, so I think there's a lot of other training that we could provide the active shooter training for. We're implementing a whole new program for, it's called Stop the Bleeding. I think everybody, it's coming to America, guys. You know, the IEDs, the mass shootings and stuff, and we need to stop the bleeding. First responders are not first responders. The first responders are the people who are at ground zero. Those people need to know how to use tourniquets, how to stop the bleeding, and not just putting Band-Aids type of CPR, but full-fledged CPR. And we have the equipment to do that. We need to know how to do that. We know how to train that stuff. Just the real, you know, things we need to start. We need to start talking about armed security. And that's something that we need to start talking about. Not something that we're going to do or we can put on the table, but that's things we need to talk about. Because when metal detectors go off or bad people come on, we need a good person to stop it. We need someone to engage it, someone who's trained and knows how to do it. We can't, like you just said, we can't substitute technology with a trained human being that knows what they're doing, the man or woman who knows what they're doing. So there's those are things that we talk about. We need to get ahead of the curve because it's been 2 weeks and Florida is starting to get more and more whispers, right? We're talking about it less and less, and it'll go away. Honestly, it's going to go away, and we'll stop talking about it until the next one happens in a few months. And then we'll say, oh, it'll be on our minds again, and then all the threat calls will come in again. We'll be super busy. And then it'll stop. It'll go away. And so we just need to keep that on the keep it on the top. So we're thinking about that because it's not if it's going to happen. It's when.
When.
You know, when's it going to happen in Sunnyside? And we should always be thinking that way. So those are a few of my ideas, and but we need to start talking about it.
Go ahead, Robert.
And I also think that we should keep it at a high priority and not let it go. Because like you're saying, it's when, if and when it's going to happen. And hopefully, knock on wood, it never does happen, but.
I was just sharing with Gina, in America, 90 children a month die by misusing car seats under the age of 8. So 8 and under, 90 babies die a month in America. And we don't care. It just goes away.
Yeah.
It's not on our minds anymore, but child car safety and putting child seats in cars probably should be a huge priority. We should be educating all our young parents how to do that stuff, but we don't. We just assume that, because it's not going to happen to us. And so if we had 90 kids dying in schools every month, maybe that would be, but would that go away too? We would get so, used to it, it would go away too. So that's just what I worry about. I worry about that we just get kind of numb to the idea. All the social media and news and stuff, we just get numb to it. We accept it as a part of our community. I don't think that's acceptable.
One more question. What's your professional opinion on arming teachers?
I disagree with it.
Okay.
I disagree. Our teachers, we pile so much in our teachers' responsibilities. The last thing we need to do is pile on. And to tell you the truth, the last thing we do is push stressful teachers. We have plenty of men and women in this country who are security forces that can be trained. We have plenty. And I'm not touched. We have veterans. We have retired police officers. I bet you guys could recruit 30 retired police officers that went to Sunnyside that could come and watch and come and be willing to stand there and do security for their grandchildren that go to your schools. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think that the teacher should have to be worried about securing a gun when they have 30 kids in their classroom.
I agree.
Ms. Dahm,
that's my opinion.
I think a lot of us think that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Dahm, you had some?
Mines are just general. It's not just for one person in particular. But there's some things that I think we need to put priority when we're looking at this that we don't stop and think about. And some of them are so simple, and then things happen, and then we wish that had been fixed or that had been done. there are quite a few doors in our schools, in the classrooms and outside, that have not been fixed. Maintenance, you know, they write it up, you know, please come and fix this. Doesn't happen, doesn't happen, doesn't happen. I think that should be one of our priorities. All of our classroom doors should be lockable. You know, there are too many of our classroom doors where the teachers are told, go into your room and lock the door, and they can't, because they can't lock that door. The outside doors, some of them are also needing to be locked or fixed. We need to make that as one of our priorities, because we can do all this training, but if our doors are open and anybody walks in,
Yeah, and then they can come, I have walked around your schools, and I've seen plenty of these gates that you buy propped open. They're propped open with trash cans and stuff, because they don't have their keys, or they don't want to use their keys, or whatever. And so there's no ownership of the safety of the school. They just, it's convenience, or you're just gonna prop it open.
right, right, and I think that we need to make that priority. We need to make sure that those gates are locked and closed, and that the inside classroom doors, we can lock them. Every single door that we have that has a key should work. And we shouldn't make the teacher wonder and not find out until it's too late that there are some, you know, they can't do certain things with their doors. We need to make sure that everybody checks their doors, and if they're not, you know, and people do send in those little things for, you know, to get them fixed, and then nothing happens, and they send another one and nothing happens. We have to make that priority. I know there's a lot. There was, you know, flooding at the high school today. So those are things that happen, but we cannot leave unlocked doors and unlocked gates till some other day, and it goes on for weeks and months of not having this fixed, because everything else just all of a sudden gets in the way. We need to get those fixed. I also feel that we need to do a better job of looking at our radios. Some of our radios, many of our radios don't work very well, and you're trying to get a hold of somebody, and you can't, because the radios are not working properly. We just need to make sure that they, you know, have the batteries that they need, and that people know how to use them, and that they are working properly. Another thing is alarms. You know, you can hear the alarms inside, but if you're out in the playgrounds or you're out in the fields, you can't hear that there's something going on, that there's an alarm going on the outside. So maybe, Javier, you can help us figure out how can we make it so that the alarms that are going off on the inside can also be heard in the playgrounds at the elementary schools, in the fields, in the high schools and middle schools.
Yeah, certainly, and it's something I will follow up with everyone involved, and Mr. Morales, because he helps a lot with the alarm design and those things. Since you brought up that topic, I did want to address one of the areas of concern that we had with Sunnyside High School with its public announcement system, its intercom system. We do have a plan in place to replace that entire system with a system that will not have the same inconsistency in terms of its reliability. And so that process is already underway as well. And in the same process, identifying, are there any areas on the campus that can't be heard? And our technicians have already started adding some additional speakers with to do those things. So I will also follow up with what you just described to kind of do an assessment of, do we have a problem hearing in other areas, and work with Mr. Morales on that.
Appreciate it. And probably one of the last things that I want to discuss is what actually, you know, a little bit has been said already, as far as us not always staying on top of things, and we need to stay on top of this. It's kind of gotten lax, not at the high schools, but at the elementary schools, when it comes to, when it comes to them practicing, knowing what they're supposed to do. Every year you get new teachers, so every year this needs to be practiced again. You know, at the beginning of the year, you know, first semester or second semester, if it wasn't done, it needs to be done. And I think if there are, and then when they do it and they see that there are problems, they talk about the problems. Oh man, that would have happened, or this would have happened. We did that really wrong. You know, this could have been a horrible disaster if you know, because this occurred or this didn't occur, and then that happens, and then, but nobody figures out, okay, let's do it this way now, and then, a month later, let's try it again, because it would have been a disaster. I know they're time consuming, but I think for this particular topic, we need to take the time.
It's what law enforcement refers to as muscle memory, and the importance of drills.
Yes.
So that you're not relying, when you're in a panic, it's not the time to be looking for your emergency plan. It's something you have to have practice, so when muscle memory sets in, you know who to deploy. And then how is that communicated? We've asked that when schools are going to have drills, that they let us know at central office so that someone can be there to help either our security or
Yes.
district security or someone that can also help them and give them feedback.
Right.
And then how do we communicate? I wanted Victor to address a little bit about the importance of communication and how we let parents in our community know about things that are going on. And even, we can never do that well enough, because even when we've sent all of that, oftentimes they'll still call and go, what's going on? Or you send it out in Spanish and they'll call, ¿Qué está pasando? So sometimes they panic, and they even after having received that. But Victor, will you talk a little bit about the communication system? Because
Officer, did you have something
No, I
first?
was just going to comment on your about repetitive drills. It's not just for the adults. I've gone to law schools where the substitute was there was never taught in your district, and the kids tell her what to do and how to do it because they've had lockdown drills over the years. The same group of kids growing up, and they know what to do. So it's not just training the new people coming in. It's keeping that repetitive stuff for the school kids, because you have them from kindergarten all the way to their senior year, so they know what to do. And they're the most trained people in your district if you do it over and over again, because they're the ones that stay the longest.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, President Crouch, members of the board, Superintendent Holmes. Just wanted to touch base on our communication process and what we do. And many of you, obviously, you get the incident commands from me. So just to walk you through that process, first thing we do is typically I'll get a call from either Frank or Mr. Gastelum, and they'll say, hey, this is developing. And sometimes there is nothing really. They're saying, there's some chatter, just FYI, this is what's happening. And it becomes, it really is a judgment call in terms of when it's actionable. If it's something that's happening in the back end that we need more information, we'll typically wait until there's actually something that merits a response. We don't want to overcorrect necessarily in terms of information. And I'm going to come back to that point in a minute, because I think we might, just because of proliferation of social media. But typically the first call is, once I get the call, it goes immediately into incident command. Everybody's able to see it, so no matter where they are, they know this is what's happening, whether it's a pipe that bursts or a threat or whatever. Immediately it goes out so that everybody in the organization knows that we need to begin those protocols. At that point, the next level of communication really becomes, it could be twofold. It could be with families, and it could be the kind of thing that can go out at the end of the day. We can say, look, it's something that happened. It wasn't as serious. It wasn't life-threatening, and just FYI. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll communicate with the school, and I'll ask the principal, what's your relationship with families? Is this something that you feel like tomorrow you're going to get a million emails or phone calls? Is this something you're comfortable handling yourself, or is this something you'd like for us to do on your behalf, or are you too busy? We'll typically have that conversation. And then the other piece is obviously media, and that depends on what is actually the one out. So a lot of times, we'll monitor social media, whether it's, I have literally every social media app on my phone, or I'll get text messages. NJ sent me one the other day, or an email say, hey, this is happening, or I got something. Somebody got the information, and this is a very close community, so sometimes you will get it from somebody who might not be in the organization that heard it from their comadre, who heard it from somebody else who posted on social media. And I think the one area where I think we might really need to look at is the proliferation of social media and how quickly the message is running. And I think the last incident that we had, what was it, on Tuesday night, which was the threat, that one traveled pretty fast. And one of the things, we were able to certainly have a message in place in the morning, but, that it might, and this is just to throw it out there, we might have to, that message might have to be preempted for 11 o'clock at night. This was something that started right around 9 o'clock at night. So, the question is, at what point do we, not everybody has email, so if we only send it through parent link and email, families that don't have email will not get that message, so there'll be a blackout there. So that's certainly a conversation that we've had, that although a lot of these are very nuanced, we're seeing these with such increased, they're becoming more common, I think, and they're becoming more common at really all times of the day, that that window that we used to have before in the evenings where you can say this can wait until tomorrow, because of social media, I'm not sure that is no longer, families might have to get a phone call, and if they're, I know as a parent, I had this conversation with my wife, I think we said, if that would have been the case at our school, we would have gotten a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning or midnight. We say, hey, that's good to know, because of, at least we know, because of just how rapidly that message is moving on in social media. So I think that's the one thing that I'm looking at differently. We've certainly done trainings in terms of, we did the lease training with Jesus Villaseñor, I think we did, and elements of sheriff were there. So we looked at different responses. We've looked at that. We've looked at social media and how you can tell if it's an image that's recycled from a shooting from 2 months ago. So I think we've kind of covered all our bases in terms of communication. We have a tool that if it's a multi-incident and we need to literally go to the phones and pull out an extra set of headsets so that they get routed, we have that in place already, should that happen in case the front area gets flooded with phone calls. So I think we're good on the infrastructure. I think just social media has changed the nature of how we respond to more nuanced things. And lastly, I have a link of folks from the last incident that I need to follow up on, because we do get a lot of things that happen on social media that kind of get hung up on. So whether it's something that got posted through the media or KGUN9 or one of our other partners, I have a list of families that commented, and they'll say some things like, no, that's not true, this is what I really heard, or families are really mad, say, no, this is, I heard, and this really happened in Choya, this happened in Sunnyside. I can go back to those Facebook users and say, hey, I just want to follow up, this happened last week, and this is on my to-do list, and say, hey, just want to let you know, tell me more about it, because a lot of people will express that frustration immediately. That can be, with anger, it can be with shock. I was a school district, why they're not doing anything. Unbeknownst to them, there are a lot of things that are happening in the back end that we just may not share at that time for whatever reason. So I think the concept of prudence, is it prudent to communicate, might be a little bit more squishy as we look at this. That's my only recommendation.
I would assume that you'd have opt-in, opt-out for parents in terms of receiving messages at 2 o'clock in the morning or
I'm not sure that's there. There's certainly, I think as soon as, and I can feel Javier getting closer because he has a little bit more knowledge. But it's in the system at least there. But I think once we have a phone number and an email, that's almost tacit permission to communicate.
Mr. Holmes?
I don't think we had considered it until the recent kind of runaway kind of social media things that we're having. So I think that's another question that we're now asking ourselves. I mean, at what point is communication an inconvenience to parents or perceived to be versus what we think is keeping them in the loop, right? And I think you can have probably a good debate about that. Do I want to send a 3 o'clock phone call to parents, waking them up, and be subject to the scrutiny of that, or do we go back out to parents and say, in the event of emergency, we're prepared to communicate with you at night, would you choose? So maybe another communication that gets to your point of opting out. It just hadn't been something of consideration because we just felt, we shouldn't communicate. But now we're finding things happening at night, and with social media, it's a lesson for us to kind of reconsider how we're opting in or opting out. And now the new question is probably going to be, do you want to receive? At what point do you not want to receive, which creates a programming nightmare, right, too? I mean, so we got to be real careful of, there's some things we don't have the capacity to do. So I can't program, well, this parent only wants that after 10, this one says not after 3. So it's either you're going to get late night phone calls or you're not going to get late phone calls. Or do we begin using social media as a communication device, right? Which that's another real sketchy area, because what you communicate there just gets tenfold or on. So I think these are all things that, because during the day, we got good systems. It really is after 8 p.m. until school starts. How do we want to communicate with parents things that are going on that's spiraling in social media that they want to know about? And again, I don't have an answer here. I'm thinking out loud some of the questions that we're asking ourselves, and then what's realistic, right? Because we can't program every phone for multiple calls that get staggered because of parents' requests. So I think it's going to probably be a phone call, whether you want evening phone calls regardless of the time or not want evening phone calls. And that would be kind of the filter. And then we need to kind of think through this social media platform as well, because that may be a vehicle, but it could also create other problems in the back end.
It's currently our last ditch effort, so if it's something that's so catastrophic that we have to go to social media to get the word out, because there's no way that it's just so important for us to do that, that's currently kind of our last ditch effort. Whereas for kids and for families, it's their first means of communication. So before I even communicate with an adult that I heard a threat, or with somebody who can help us control this, my first thing is to tweet about it, and it just creates but it's normal for kids, and we have to, and we're sensitive to that as well. So.
Mr. Hamill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kraft. Now, what if the parent catches wind of social media, whatever? Who are they directed to contact if they catch wind of something that's going on in the district? One of the folks here, security here, police, 911?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've never necessarily, provided, I mean, it's not in the parent handbook necessarily. We've never told parents in the event that this happens. I think that's, it's always going to be, here's a better way of saying it. We've never not found out about it, right? So whether it's directly through a phone call that came through the 555, the 444 number, or through email goes in social media. I mean, we'll hear about it, and so I would almost not want families to not communicate with us. Typically, it's the latter, that they over communicate, they'll overshare, or they'll be there first thing in the morning. I would almost would rather see that, but by that time we've more or less gotten wind of it, and we've deployed folks so they can be available.
Thank you.
I have just one.
Mr. Holmes?
Okay, sure.
Ms. Quintero?
Just a couple things, and I want, the door thing is the one that bothers me, so I'm kind of stuck on that right now, about how we're going to remedy some of the things that we do have control over right now. So we'll circle back. I just kind of, the guys just kind of make sure we're on making that a top priority, because that's something we should be doing, right? I mean, we have the capacity to make sure the door is locked. If we're not doing it, then shame on us for not kind of making that a priority as we're kind of looking at that. And the communication with principals, right? Re-emphasizing the importance of a lot of these practices that for convenience sake are not being addressed, because I don't want to get this teacher mad because she's propping the door open and she's getting in a car. I mean, that's like no longer, people are going to be inconvenienced, and too bad. I mean, that's going to be the attitude we're going to have to take. If you're going to be upset about it, you know what, watch the media every day. But, this is kind of where we've gotten to a point where these kind of favors to people that we have been allowed over time are just going to have to be stopped, and it'll create some tension, and that's for sure. But if people aren't understanding that, then shame on them too, quite frankly. And so we'll continue to work on that. I do, after your comment, maybe I want to talk a little bit about the student advisory group. I think there were some things that we learned from that would be important for the governing board to know.
Ms. Quintero?
So I know that we have supposed to have fire drills once a month and bus evacuations. I don't know if it's quarterly or quarterly. Okay, so kids are already dealing with trainings. So adding a few more is going to be just, they're going to know how to do things immediately. And locking the doors is, one automatic thing, turn off the lights, automatic, because we're saving energy. So, get in the door, lock the door, shut the window, everything, and so it'll just be automatic. So that's great that you're doing the trainings regularly. And I wouldn't mind watching a few trainings myself, it's like, so.
The active shooter training, that.
Oh, yeah, I'll be the victim, right?
Ms. Miller, could you make sure the board gets an invitation to that June 4th?
As soon as we have
training?
the dates
Or
confirmed,
the
we'll
dates,
certainly
yeah.
let
Yeah, I
everybody
think
know.
we're waiting, pretty much that's your week, that first week in July, that month, that first, not June, I mean
It's
June.
one day, it's a one-day training, right?
It's a one-day training, but you guys have 5 days.
That
so-
we can invite different people.
Yeah,
Is
you'll
that-
have 30 seats a day for 5 days, that's
So-
Monday through Friday.
So
You'll
we're
get a
very
ticket.
grateful to.
I'll get a
Ron
ticket.
for-
Get a
Yeah, I
ticket.
think that it's very important, and like Deputy Powell said, that it's not just for the administrators. It really should be for everybody,
Everybody.
that everybody
Yeah,
knows what to
I'll
do.
give a quick example. Mary Montano, excuse me, I'm not being all proper here. Down at Some of You, she gave me permission to say, call my lockdown anytime during today, anytime you want. And I was like, because most times they do a really vanilla training. The kids are basically already locked down, and then they lock them down, right? So I did it right in the middle of her lunch. It's like 3rd, 4th grade lunch. I was like, practical, she's going to give it to me. I wasn't even on campus. I called her on the phone and told the secretary, I said, this sheriff's department locked down your school. I wasn't even there. I was sitting at the park next door. Anyways, so I drive over there. I'm listening to the radio. They're going crazy. They don't know what to do. I'm like, lock it down. Lock it. And I get on the radio and I said, lock it down. And the lunch ladies, the whole lunch program, they never stopped serving lunch. They didn't do anything. And they're in there and they're like, lock it down. And they're like, they've never been trained. They had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And so even an impromptu training. So that was a huge thing for us.
And to piggyback on that, when Deputy Powell
Priority.
talks about locking down, the law enforcement is not going to take the time to say, this is a lockdown or a shelter in place. So they know to ask, they should know to ask, if law enforcement, if Deputy Powell says lock it down, does he mean a full-blown lockdown, turn off the lights, cover the windows, nobody in, nobody out? That's a full lockdown. Versus a shelter in place that business as usual inside, but something's going on in the community, like somebody's running away from a police officer or a home invasion or something. So schools need to know the difference because it makes a huge difference in the school. Business as usual when it's shelter in place, but the perimeter, it's what would be referred to as a perimeter lockdown. So schools need to ask that because the law enforcement officer is not going to take the time to say, okay, this is a shelter in place, so this is what, so that's important to communicate that to the school.
How many different categories do we have? Just the two?
Just the two. We don't want to have too many things to worry about, or we don't want schools to say this is a code blue, code red, danger, intruder, lockdown. So we don't want people to try to decipher codes
Right.
we don't want them a whole bunch of different kinds of information.
Right.
Lockdown,
Shelter in place.
full-blown lockdown means everybody turns out lights, lock it down, quiet, hide. Bring in kids, if they're walking in the hallway, you grab them, you put them in the closest safe place you can. Now, part of the training, and Deputy Powell, you may want to talk a little bit about that, because something that they're also focusing on is not just when do you hide, but when do you run? In Florida, some of the students were told, run as fast as you can. So you have to determine, and based on what we're being told, where the danger is it possible to run away from it? Or is it safer at that moment to hide from it? And then there's that whole issue of when do you fight?
We provide a whole 2-hour presentation on run, fight, hide, and just the human nature of what you're going to do in a critical incident. It's a great presentation. I would hate to go through it tonight, but
Thank you.
One more question.
And that's another thing that we could teach, not just the parent. I mean, we could teach that to all the staff here on the district.
And students, if they,
Right.
students, you know, one of our law enforcement officers told us during a lockdown or a shelter in place, do not confiscate students' phones. We've gotten way past the point where we're going to confiscate phones. Now, if students, you know, in school, if they're cheating with their phone or whatever, that's another issue. But to teach kids during a situation like this, to text their parents, and sure, there are going to be some kids that might abuse that, but that needs to say, I am safe, you know, check the website, or, you know, letter coming, or we're okay, we're locked in. Those are important things that students can be very instrumental in informing parents, because if you're that parent that's outside that gate, you're not going to believe anybody except that kid who says, Mom, I'm okay. You know,
Mr. Amil?
Just one quick, a proper protocol when somebody goes to the school or the visitor, and Dr. Paul, now I'll give you another, Sheriff Paul. Sheriff Paul, what he indicated about the new gates that are in place, I've seen it. Where at Desert View, where there is no protocol. In some cases, people just drop out, they park, and they go into that side gate by the cafeteria, the faculty cafeteria, and it's open, it's not locked. Instead of having them report to the office or have a designated parking area for visitors and then report to the office.
Yeah, pedestrian management is
Yeah.
huge, and there's a whole science to that in all businesses and malls and stuff. And the pedestrian management ideally is everybody comes to one area.
One area, yeah.
And there's no other way to get on.
Right.
And you're all secured down, and that's where you could have your metal detectors, your
Mhm.
security, everyone's getting checked, and you know who they are.
Yep.
It's very important. Huge security. Without that, you can't even see.
Right.
There's not more than one way to get into an airport terminal. There's only
It's only one way, right.
There's only one way to get into a concert. There's only one way to get into the bank, you know? So that's just, for security reasons, you got it, that pedestrian management is number one.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, you had something, some wrap-up or some?
Yeah, just when we met with, just to piggyback on the student advisory group, I think that was a very informative meeting as well, which will lead to some ideas from the students that I think are surfacing. The reason I say that is that the high school students that are engaged in the systems thinking training that are going to be traveling, one of the topics that I asked them to address was this idea of school safety. And what are the issues, the root cause of those issues, and what are some systems issues that, and so I'm eager for them to come back. One of the things that surfaced was a kind of a communication tool for students to actually report things that are going on, or how they feel that can actually be, someone receives to act on certain things. I mean, that's going to have to be filtered. What that's going to look like, I'm waiting for them to come back with some more specific recommendations. But the three areas that actually surfaced in that particular meeting were, you know, what role can teachers play, particularly to identifying students that may need additional support. You know, they may not be able to try to know that, provide the support, but they can identify and report to someone, hey, I'm very concerned about this kid, you know, and making that much more, that level of awareness part of the process by which we identify kids who we may feel need some social support services. So one is just knowing your kids. And that came from the students, you know, does everyone know all their kids enough to say, this is a kid that, you know, I'm very worried about. And again, I don't think it's additional burden we're putting onto you. I'm just saying, we stress the idea of relationships. You know, knowing your kids is just part of the professional responsibility you have. Know who your kids are, so that if something's happening, not that you got to do something about it, but you can at least minimally have another set of eyes in the building to say, hey, I'm worried about this kid. The second one is what prevention methods that we have in the school, right? What are our counselors prepared to do? What are our principals prepared to do? What are the mechanisms where we can refer kids, particularly who didn't need additional help? What our partnerships look like? I mean, those are things that we have in place, but I think could use another revisiting of, are we too loose again versus, right? Do we have a tighter system for referrals? And I don't know that answer. And the last piece that came up is, what role can the students play ensuring that kids who are loners or don't want, can actually feel more accepted into the social circles that, you know, I say this, are somewhat pathological at the high school, but also start playing themselves out at the elementary schools. You know, those ideas that no one eats alone, those programs that, you know, should be sitting alone, can we ensure their students see themselves as being that hello to someone, that a kid who's, you know, may choose to be an introvert, but that a lot of time it isn't by choice. Many times it's because they don't feel like they've befriended everyone. And so what roles can we place on schools? I mean, they talked a lot about that. They talked about, in one case at one school, and I see Mr. Ludeman called me like right after that, hey, we addressed that issue already with one of the monitors, right? And that's but I mean, this is where the candidness of the students is really important, because they said, well, one monitor, there was something going on in the school, and was on their phone playing a game. And of course it gets back to the principal, because they said, hey, make sure you let the principal knows, hey, we took care of that. I mean, but their honesty and is super important in dealing with these issues, because we think as adults that we've got everything handled. And we're defensive sometimes because, you know, any critique of the current system is a critique on someone personally. I think that's just the nature of the work, and so coming from kids, it's a wake-up call, right? And it's like, well, this is their perception, and in many cases they're right. So I think taking advantage of them more often in that conversation is going to be really important, but I'm also eager to bring back to the governing board what the students come back with. They will be traveling, and hopefully that continues to be the topic, that they can come back and report on their travels and what they kind of teased out as a result of the training that they're going through.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Is there anything else, Dr. Favela?
Just wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts based on what Mr. Holmes said, that a lot of the research shows that, sure, we have to continue to look at our discipline system and our making sure that kids, you know that there are consequences, but there are also the importance of creating that climate for students where they feel like they belong there and that they're learning replacement behaviors. They're more likely to give you information if they feel they have a relationship with someone at the school. You're more likely to get a student who says, hey, I heard something, I saw something. And as we were talking about this, I know Mr. Gastelum had brought up the idea of maybe looking to something like a student tip line, sort of like an 88 crime call, even if it's anonymous. And yes, will some kids call and be knuckleheads about it? Well, perhaps, but we might get some really good tips where they could be anonymous that says, I heard this, I'm being bullied, or this is happening, that we could have a way to look into that. But also not let up, just like we don't let up on the safety and security, we don't let up on the building of relationships, because that's important. And another thing that Deputy Powell brought up is the importance of being able to respond to students' mental health and behavioral health needs. And I think our behavioral health system is sorely lacking in Pima County and across Arizona, that trauma-based response, and whether kids who are depressed or have bipolar issues or whatever, the student in Florida, when you start looking at it, there were other issues aside from the fact that he just was a violent kid. When you start going back to root cause, there may be some mental illness there. Or they even thought about things like fetal alcohol. And now with all of the, without getting into that whole issue with drugs and whatever, we're seeing different behaviors of students that are more impulsive kind of, lack of impulse control and those kinds. So it can't be lost to think about, what about the mental health? How do we work together to get those wraparound services? It's very difficult now with all the different, with the regional behavioral health system. It's not simple. We can't call for La Frontera counselors to come to our district. Those things were cut when they had budget cuts. So I think that's a continued conversation with all of us, because that's a huge issue. Someone who's depressed, or, you know, a lot of kids get bullied. I get that. But not everybody who got bullied is going to turn a semi-automatic rifle on somebody. So we work at it from all ends, and mental health and also building relationships is important. But I'm very happy to work with such an outstanding team. This is a representation, and many of the things, the boots on the ground things, like with Ryan and with our TPD and with Frank, that they prevent things that we don't even hear about, because they address them when they're out driving around in schools. And that's another thing we can let them know, to pay extra attention to the doors. But as they're out driving around and checking on schools, oftentimes they'll catch situations before they get worse. So my thanks to everyone on the team who helps so much. And of course, Ms. Benton, who deals with every single incident that we've worked together. So thank you for bringing this to a discussion, and we'll continue to.
And Mr. Holmio has one more.
One more.
One more.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is so important as well. To the point that even the young man or young lady that you don't think has any mental issues, but has that breaking point, we have to make some kind of hotline where he or she could call. Because we had that incident with one of our cadets. I mean, the nicest kid that you, and smart, go-getter, I mean, to the T, walked the line, and took his life. So we, you know, these are the things that mentally we have to take very serious, and, you know, establish some sort of hotline for those individuals as well, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I think we've had 4 really
Great.
pertinent
Very
conversations
good.
tonight, and very involved, very intense. So, next item on the agenda is suggestions for future agenda items. Are there any?
Should I bring that up? Do we want to talk about that? Or later? Okay.
Was that one, or?
No.
No.
Ms. Dong, did you have one?
Yes, I'd like to see if we can have one here. Because of the current things that are going on in this country, this state, and this city, I'd like to bring back some discussion on the immigration issues. I want to bring back a discussion on our policy on some of the immigration issues, on our policy on Border Patrol. We've had that discussion a few years back. It was a very fruitful discussion, but it was a few years back. Things have changed since then. Recently, there's been some very big changes, and I want to make sure that we as a district keep on top of what's going on with immigration and with partnerships. We have a great partnership with him. That's because I want him to leave the room before I asked anything, because we do. But at the same time, we know now that there are some things that are going on out there. There's some partnerships that are going on out there that we need to keep on top of as far as our philosophy as a school district is concerned. So I would just like to bring that back, and I would like to see and be reminded, I don't know if it was Dr. Favela at the time, what were some of the policies that we put in place when we were discussing these issues in the past.
So you want it for information and discussion? Or do you want action on it?
Well, if there aren't any policies that we feel are sufficient, then we might need to have an action.
Okay.
But we can probably bring it as information first, so then we could see during the information that we are lacking in policy, then bring it back with a policy, because we can't bring it back with a policy at the beginning.
Right.
Since we
That's
might
why-
already
that's why I
have
was asking the
something.
question.
Yeah, so let's do information first, and that might be sufficient, but I don't remember if we have something already in place, and if we don't, I would like to look into something that we can do.
Any other suggestions for future agenda items?
Not at this time.
Is there a motion, or we have no unfinished business, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Crouch?
Aye, meeting's adjourned.
Daniel's gone.